Luke Storey, my man, thank you for being here with me.
Oh, it's so good to see you. Such a great excuse to spend time together.
Always, always. I wish we could spend more time together, though, actually. And you're trying to convince me to move a little bit further south. I'm working my way there.
I'm trying to convince everyone to move into my neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know, I was texting my brother a couple of days ago, sending him listings and stuff. He has no plans to move to Texas, by the way, but I'm just like, hey, how about this house? How about this house? You know?
Dude, this place is becoming like the hub for holistic health, libertarian ideology, and consciousness sort of overlapping together. It's weird because I didn't end up in this area for that reason. I just happened to end up here because my wife's sister lived in this area, but it just happened to be that like I'm in this space and everyone who is in this space is coming to this area. Have you thought about like why that is or what caused that to happen? Why everyone's sort of congregating here in Austin?
What I noticed when we came to Prospect here in over Christmas time in 2020 was that there was some sort of attractor field here for a certain frequency of person. And I think that frequency existed in a few other places where there were little pods. And then with COVID, we all got a bit nervous about our sense of security and way of life. And so I think there was a convergence of like-minded people here around that time, including myself. Partly due to the fact that wherever we were was untenable and getting pretty oppressive. And there was something here that I don't know that any of us could identify other than just the concentration of like-minded people. I mean, that was the thing that really sold us when we came here. I mean, it was...
But why though? Like, why the concentration of like-minded people? Because that's the thing I try to sit with. I'm like, what is it about this place? Like, what was the point where, okay, this is now becoming the hub? You know what I mean?
I mean, I think I'd only been to Austin 3 times when I used to speak at Paleo Effects, an event that was held here. And every time I came here, I would go to the event, stay in my Airbnb a few blocks away, go to Barton Springs Pool, and I had like a 3 or 4 mile radius of experience in Austin. So I'm no expert on it, but I think culturally and geopolitically, it's a very interesting place and probably speaks to that resonance and that field that have attracted us here because you have, I don't know, it's almost like a military positioning because Texas is still so big, it feels like its own country. And you
Really
feel like,
does.
there's so much space between Austin and the rest of the country. It feels somehow strategically secure. And then you have, I mean, I don't know, I don't spend much time in Dallas or Houston, but if you get, out into the country, it's very conservative and you're going to hear like guns firing if you're out somewhere. I find that to be very comforting, personally. Living in LA for 32 years, if you heard guns going off, you get nervous and, look out the window. Out in Texas, it's like, oh God, it's like a breath of fresh air.
Right.
My whole nervous system relaxes because somebody's out there firing a 50 cal on their ranch or something, So it's like you have this kind of don't tread on me, heavily armed militia energy in the outskirts. But then you also have super crappy food and no culture out there, right? I mean, maybe some decent music in a roadhouse here and there. But then as you get closer into Austin, there's an influx of like old school Texas and then the keep Austin weird thing, coffee shops and funky thrift stores. And
the music,
back in the day,
the arts, the good food.
There's head shops, so it's like, it's got a little bit of California essence to it and more, I would say like socially liberal. So I think there's kind of there's some sort of frequency match there because, I mean, I've never been into politics whatsoever, but I don't know, 10 years ago, if you would have said, are you liberal or conservative? I would definitely say liberal because,
Same.
I don't believe in useless laws for nonviolent crimes and I think everyone should have sex with any adult that is consenting. I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I don't care what color your skin is. Like, I've just always been, I guess, what would be considered progressive in that way. Yet at the same time, I'm very freedom oriented, and I think guns are a great tool, and you know what I mean?
Totally.
I'm not a fan of any form of government whatsoever. So I think for me, and maybe people like me, there's a resonance with, social liberalism and then sort of legal and fiscal conservatism.
Yeah.
There's some like middle ground there.
Totally. There's something about Austin having, at least to my knowledge, as far back as like the 1990s, being a more blue leaning city in the midst of an overwhelmingly red state, in the mix of those two things together, that makes it so, irrespective of what someone's political ideology is within Austin or on the outskirts of Austin, there's always these libertarian undertones behind it where it's like, look, dude, I do me, you do you. We're on the same page that we keep Austin weird. Outside of Austin, it's a little bit different, but it's all good. It's like that type of vibe,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But I think for myself and my wife, Allison, the community was really the strong pull here. And especially during that time, because people are migrating from states and cities with heavily enforced lockdowns and face diapers and just all this insanity. There were a lot of like house parties and gatherings. I mean, it's like, so everyone who was anyone that I'd ever met or wanted to meet would be at these gatherings, and they were nonstop. I mean, it got like exhausting at a certain point, And then as things sort of calmed down with the pandemic, not in a negative way, but there was a lot less of that. And now people are kind of siloed in a sense. And, everyone just kind of found their tribe of people with whom they most resonated. And so it's very much like it was living in LA for me now, where there's a lot of really great people that I feel like I either am close to or want to get closer to. But it's like, where you live, it's like, oh man, that guy lives 30 minutes away, I live an hour away. It's like, you don't end up getting together as much.
Totally,
and that's
man.
how it was in LA. I mean, I lived there for 32 years. I mean, over 3 decades. I had so many amazing friends and acquaintances, and you only saw your 2 or 3 best friends who lived nearby. And then, you'd see people, oh man, let's get together. And
I know.
I used to think it was like a California or LA flake thing. Oh man, let's hang out. Yeah, we'll go to dinner. And you make all these plans and that never happens. But I think it's just, it's really more of a symptom of people just living in a city with a lot going on. And as the COVID stuff calmed down, everyone got busy in their own lives and their own families. And so now I feel kind of much more isolated here than I did in the beginning, because now if I want community, I have to make an effort to make that happen. I'm not getting texts like every 3 days, hey, we're having a thing,
It's just a symptom of how we're living in modernity, though. Like, I don't think we're meant to be as spread out as we are now. I actually do think we're supposed to be living in community with each other. Maybe we have our own individual plots within that community, but like we've all fantasized about that at some point of living on land with a bunch of your friends and living in a like tight-knit community, still having your own space and minding each other's space, but coming together with like a central area where you're gathering regularly, communing for meals, dancing, raising kids together.
I would love that. And I've thought about that so much. And then the thing that comes up is like, it takes a while to get to know someone.
True.
Right? I mean, I've met people, especially kind of in the context of, plant medicine work and things like that. And I've had incredible bonds with people and felt like I really knew them and trusted in their integrity and so on. And then either someone was out of alignment and I just didn't see it, or they go off the rails for some reason or another. And I've had a few of those happen, and I go, man, thank God we're not living in like a conscious community together, because it would be so awkward when you just don't vibe with someone anymore. But I guess that's where kind of the tribal councils and things like that come in. You would, I assume, build infrastructure to reconcile differences and to negotiate boundaries and your do's and don'ts, wants and don't wants, and things like that. But
have you explored family constellations?
A bit, yeah. Yeah.
That's a cool way on a both familial but also communal level to come back into coherence and harmony with disagreements and things like this.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do still kind of hold that as a hope somehow that something like that could happen, because I'm writing a book about loneliness, and it's the irony of like anyone that's written a book, which this is my first experience with it, and we can talk more about that later. It's a lot. But the funny thing is, I'm writing this book about loneliness, and when you write, you're alone, right? It's like it's a very solo venture. You know, you might collaborate with editors and things like that, but it's like the actual time sitting there hitting the keyboard is very introspective and very alone. And I'm realizing as I go through this process of really unpacking that particular, human challenge, I'm very isolated a lot of the time, apart from having people over to record podcasts and things. But it's like, wow, I don't really, outside of my wife, I don't have much of a social life, which has become more apparent, having just lost my dad 3.5, 4 weeks ago. I'm really noticing that now, which is why I sent you a text. I was like, hey, I'm having a couple homies over Saturday. I've lived in that house 3 years, and I've probably had people over like 4 or 5 times. It's not because I don't want to, I just forget. Just, it doesn't occur to me. And I'm also not much of a planner. I'm super just kind of make up my life as I go every day. Maybe check the calendar on a good day and go, okay, I have to be somewhere or be accountable to someone or something. But it's kind of a downside of being a really spontaneous, live in the moment, create your life as it happens kind of guy. Because if I don't make an effort to build in community, and avail myself to support other people and invite other people to support me, it kind of doesn't happen, and I find myself much more isolated than I would like to be.
Do you think that there was sort of an effect that happened with you with your dad passing away that reignited the understanding of what's important in your life and sort of made you more aware of, okay, I need community. I need community around me?
Oh man, absolutely. Especially, I have 2 younger brothers, 12 and 8 years my junior, and half brothers. And, we talk and we stay in touch, but not that much, And thankfully, I was able to share the experience of my dad graduating Earth School with them. We all made it to Florida and stuff. But even since then, I'm noticing, since we all parted and kind of went back home to our lives, I've noticed, wow, I really need to put more effort into those relationships, because, man, you just never know how much time you've got, and thinking about, and this is an awareness I had with my dad, I think, for the past few years. He was 81 when he passed. But I started thinking about, I'm terrible at math, but I started thinking about the math. Okay, so say your parent is 80 and you don't live near them, which is the case for me. He lived in Colorado and Florida respectively. So I usually go out to Colorado like once a year in the summer and stay for a week or two. And you have so many number of days and so many number of hours to spend together. And I started deducing, okay, if he lives until he's 90, that means if I make it out there every year, I'm only going to see him 9 times, right?
Yeah.
And last summer, for a number of different reasons, I didn't get out there to see him. I did the year prior. And I remember when I didn't go, I was like, this could be the last one and you're not going, and I had to kind of reconcile that. So I think it's like, as time starts to condense, especially as people get older and the inevitable is approaching, every opportunity to connect and share time together and express your love for one another, it starts to become much more meaningful, So I've been, I won't say wrestling with, because I'm decent at this point in my life of accepting what is as it is. But that said, if I could go back, over the past 10 years, if I went and visited my dad once a year, I would have made it twice a year, or called him more when, he would always text me and call me, and it would take me forever to get back to him. And eventually I would. But I think, oh man, now that I can't just pick up the phone on a whim and call my dad, thinking about how many times I had that opportunity and I didn't take it for whatever reason. Other things seemed to be more important. And sometimes things were, life happens. You can't just, be at the beck and call of any relationship, because you have to take care of your own life. But I think, that the value of relationships, both in and outside of the family, is, and this is very new. I mean, I'm still just in the process of reconciling this and unpacking the experience, but that is definitely top of mind. It's like, wow, you only have so many summers left, or so many Christmases, or so many phone calls or texts. And even with the people that aren't older, even just with my wife, it's like, oh man, like how many days do we actually have left in this particular form? And it's a funny thing, we're wired with a built-in attachment to form. And that's what adheres us to each other, right? So that we can love and grow together. And I'm very aware that is like a construct of being embodied, and that there is a formless version of us that is also here, present right now, and that is absolutely probably more alive than ever when you leave the body. But still, there's a reason why we're tethered to those attachments to form. Yeah. Like I like my friend Alec in this form right here, and there's a part of me that really wants to hang on to that. And if you change forms, and I'm not yet that in touch with the form that you evolve into, it feels as though I've lost you, So it's like a process for me of kind of honoring my attachment to form and making use of that more so than I did before. I think before, I never really lost anyone that I was really actively close to. I just thought, well, I don't believe death is a reality. And, if any of us goes, then, we just meet on the other side and just keep carrying on like we always were. But that was because I hadn't had to really reconcile such a dramatic change in form, and to really, to really address that natural and innate attachment to it.
Yeah, there's something about those individual moments of what is a formless soul, infinite, eternal soul, embodied into physical form, that is a moment by moment expression of that boundless soul's beauty in physical reality, that I think when we're hustling and bustling about life and life is happening, it's not that we regret, or we might regret and miss out on those moments, but it's reflecting on like, we only have a finite number of those moments, and there's a reason we're in this physical form. So when we're in someone's presence, and like I think back to my daughter all the time. Like I've been crying. I've cried on a few episodes lately. I'm already on the verge right now because I'm thinking how this relates in my own life. My daughter getting older, and I only have a certain amount of time when she's that age, And yes, I know that she's infinite. I know that she's eternal, and I'm hoping and I'm trusting that I'll have many moments with her for the rest of my life. But there's something about those individual moments at those various points in time that is a unique expression of that soul's beauty in that physical form, that I just want to make sure I'm present for those moments.
Absolutely.
Not only physically present, but I'm there and I'm seeing them, and that's like, I think that's what we desire in our hearts.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Something that I've been navigating for the last 3 years or so is the desire to have kids and not have that come to fruition thus far. And it was something that I actively feared and avoided for my entire life up until I met my wife. And spending time with my brother Cody, and he's got 2 kids. One I think is about 2, and the other one's new, is a few weeks or months. I don't even know how old. I don't I'm bad at tracking time. But when we were at Florida, going through the process of my dad leaving, I got to spend quite a bit of time with Bjorn, my little nephew, and just watching him say words for the first time. And like the coolest thing is Alice and I would say something, we'd be in the kitchen or something, and he would mimic us and repeat it. I was like, that's so cool. He's never said that before. Like
Right.
he didn't even know that was a thing until I just said it and then he said it. And I had that realization, like, wow, that first instant of him saying that is never going to happen again.
Right.
Right. And it's like, maybe I don't see him for another year. He's going to be a totally different kid. And I will have missed that entire period of every little incremental evolution that he makes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, what am I going to do? Like change my whole life and go move in with them? No, it's just, all I think I can do is, maybe make an effort to spend more time, right?
Yeah.
And be present for more of those moments. But more than anything, it's like to really appreciate what's going on in that moment and to really savor it and not just, I don't know, check out or brush it off as something insignificant, because it's really significant when that person's gone. Every little thing. Like when I think about my dad, I started crying on the way over here. Just we can unpack like how grief is just such a fascinating part of the human experience, but just like one particular memory of my dad, it's just like, it's just a subtle nuance of his personality. Certain like element of his humor or a gleam in his eye of something that he appreciated or enjoyed. This one memory is like, we were up in what he called the high country in Colorado, which is like when you get up to where there's no trees, that's the high country right above timberline. And that, I don't know why, but that was like one of his favorite things to do, is like he wants to get up there and really go condor view, And we rented this little canoe, and we were rowing across this lake to go explore and like find a good place to cold plunge. We were big cold plunge buddies. And we're in this canoe, and we're going, I'm facing forward in the direction we're going, and he's backward and he's rowing, and he's just looking at me and just smiling, It was like nothing's even happening on the surface, but there was actually real depth to what was happening. In that, I think this one comes up because I took a short video of him with my phone, and I have that video, and he's in his element. He's doing the thing that he's been doing since he was a little kid and loves to do, and could really sense that it was so meaningful that he was doing it with me. So like those moments are so easy to take for granted because it's just a moment. We're just on the surface, we're just moving across a body of water from one side to the other, but within that, there's such a depth and richness if one is paying attention.
Yeah.
And thankfully, in the past, quite a few years, I've learned to pay attention, in those moments. Thank God. And so did he, which is why the loss is so much more impactful than it would have been had we been two people that weren't paying attention.
Right.
That didn't see in those moments, wow, there's an essence of something happen here that's subtle, but it's also so meaningful. So that's, what a huge gift that is, right? To be able to start to like feel into those moments that are gone and won't come back in that form, and to actually integrate that as wisdom and fortifying in my value system. Like, oh, don't just, if I'm driving down the road and I start crying because I think of that particular memory, it's not going to serve me to bypass it because it's a strong emotional experience. But B, there's something really valuable in that's so deep and complex.
Yeah.
In just a it's not even a 5-minute piece of video. It's probably 30 seconds, of like a 2-hour trip on the lake, right?
Yeah.
But just in that moment, there was such, such a pure expression of who that guy was.
And I'd imagine layers of richness behind it too,
Totally,
given
yeah.
the context of like the relationship between you and him leading up to that point, the highs and the lows with that, which I know.
Yeah, like, we have so much in common in that
Right.
regard. But yeah,
Right.
That's so true. It's like there's such a depth of history, both together in the healing and cultivating of our relationship throughout our lives, but also in the work that both of us had done and continue to do on ourselves that made that moment and that beautiful yet subtle bond possible. So it's representative of something so much bigger, which is, I'm sure, why it hits me more than just some other random memory or random photo or video, right? It's like, oh, there's something really in there that's quite meaningful for a father and son to have gone through so many different peaks and valleys of of hurt and joy and all of the things in between. That moment is like a real treasure trove of self-discovery and self-appreciation too. Like, wow, holy shit. I mean, that's the thing I'm realizing is like a gratitude for my soul's willingness to forego resentments and to be willing to work through hurt.
Yeah.
And to be able to put myself in someone else's shoes, like to have true empathy for my dad's experience. And it's funny, man, I just it's like, I'm just the kind of guy, I just want to face the uncomfortable to just, because on the other side of that is feeling more comfortable, right?
Yeah.
Suppressing it and avoiding it. So I've been really kind of, day-to-day life still, the show must go on. So there's, I have so much time, I can like allow myself to kind of disappear into this experience. But one of the few regrets, thankfully, that I had when my dad died was I'd always wanted to record a podcast with him. He was such a cool fucking guy. And he had so much wisdom and life experience. And he was just such a great mentor to me. And I felt like, man, I just want to share him with the world. And just for whatever reason, I never got that done. Logistically, whatever, I don't know. I'd even bring my camera gear out there like every now and then and I'm going to do it. And then, I don't know, it just wasn't the right day. We couldn't pull it together and it didn't happen. So that was something I felt some regret about. And then I came back from Florida where he died. And I knew I had this video. I did record kind of an interview with him in 2018, but it was more just kind of family history for posterity. If I were to ever have kids or my brother have kids, like, what little we know about his side of the family would be gone with him because he's the only kind of carrier of those memories and such. So I recorded it for that purpose. So I just kind of discounted it until I went and watched it. And now I'm actually going to release it as a podcast, like a bonus podcast episode.
Amazing.
But to do so, I had to go, I didn't even know this. It was 2.5 hours long. I was like, holy shit, I went pretty deep with the guy. But in order to release it publicly, which I felt compelled to do, just to honor him and just to honor my experience of losing him, I had to go through it and make sure there wasn't anything in there that would be offensive or hurtful to anyone still alive. I mean, I don't think he said anything he would be ashamed of, but it was kind of personal at certain points. And in the process of going through that video, it's like, and my wife happens to be out of town, and I'm like, I don't want to sit and watch this thing. Like, I want to avoid discomfort like the next guy or girl. And I just knew if I want to achieve this goal, which is to fulfill something that I thought that I missed out on, that I just have to walk through this fire. And so, you know, watching that video is really, really difficult in many ways, especially just doing so alone at night in my house. I don't know, just kind of, it's gnarly.
Yeah.
But I know that that's a necessary part of the process to get to a more pure place of praise and appreciation and love, because that's what's really behind the grief. The grief of the loss is not really hurt. It's really just so much love that one's system doesn't really know what to do with it other than to feel sad.
Yeah.
You know, but like underneath that, on a deeper level, there's just like, wow, I got 54 years with like such a phenomenal, courageous, unique person. He was just like a really different guy. Never met anyone like that. And everyone we love to us is probably like that. But objectively, you know, like removing me as this guy's son, he had a really wild life, and he was a wild ass guy. I mean, just a different kind of guy. Like I think I am in my own way, you know? And so, you know, my part of my learning with this is just like, wow, how can I go into the core of appreciation and really amplify that, and also be brave enough to weather the emotional waves that come with that, you know? But we're not taught how to grieve. I never had any like grieving lessons. Oh, when you have a loss, you know, here's what you do. I think in our culture, to your point of us being spread out, I mean, we're just so fragmented. We're so dysfunctional. It's insane. And a lot of that is kind of by design, I think. And some of it is just population, man. We're not, you know, we're just, our societies are too big to hold that. And so if we haven't done some work to recreate that, and as you were speaking about, in building our own communities, and I mean, you know, the days of like 50, 60 people roving around the land, taking care of each other, are long gone and never coming back. And so I think for whatever reason we've lost that. We also don't have a system and rituals and ceremonies to help us navigate these inevitable experiences in life. So what I'm doing is trying to cobble together my own method of doing that.
What does that look like for you? Because there is, I mean, I'm sure there are on the internet and the abundance of influencers these days who have like various programs on a variety of topics. I'm sure there's grieving programs out there, but I'm sure you're like me. I'm not going to go look for a grieving program necessarily. Yeah. So what does that process look like for you?
Part of it is watching those videos and looking at photos. Yeah. Because I don't want to do that. So I know that's what I need to do. I want to medicate, escape, avoid, numb out, tune out. I mean, I don't, but the egoic structure of my psyche wants to avoid anything that is, you know, that it judges to be an uncomfortable or unpleasurable feeling. So part of it is that, but that still doesn't have a lot of structure to it. It's just like, I get the idea, oh, maybe you could open a photo album, and then I go, nah, not right now. I got something else to do. And then later on I go, no, you got to do it. And then I do it. talking to my brothers. I had a great call with my brother Cody last night, and we cried and chatted and just shared our experience with one another. I think talking about it is a big thing. I mean, I'm sure if I had a therapist, I'd probably be talking to them. I just don't have one at the moment.
Mm.
Another idea that I had that I'm going to do soon, and inviting you guys, a couple friends over Saturday. I wasn't going to make this like a big deep grieving party or something, but just getting together with some close friends and just allowing myself to be seen in the experience a bit more. But I also intend to go out on some land with some close friends and just allow whatever needs to come up. I'll probably bring some candles and things to burn and some guitars and play some medicine songs and bring some photos of my dad and just, show people that didn't know him.
Mm-hmm. Just honor him.
Just to share like who he was and what he meant to me. Because only my brothers and my dad's wife know that. People, I mean, my wife to some degree, she met him a few times, so she gets him. But it's like, I think a lot of, moving through something like that, whether it's loss of a loved one or whatever, there's so much power in being witnessed in the experience and also in the vulnerability. I mean, even just sitting here with you, I don't know how many people are going to watch this or hear this. And thankfully I'm not as attached to the value of other people's perception or judgments as I once was. I'm sure I still have more to work on, but like, it's interesting, like publicly, it's easier for me to be vulnerable than it is with just a few people. When it's like, you're right here and you're looking in my eyes, and there's 6 of you or 10 of you and I'm losing my shit is a lot more confronting than when there's a camera or a microphone on or something for some reason. And I don't know why it's that way, but I think it's like maybe part of the reason, because I did an episode with my wife a week ago. Well, actually, it came out today, kind of just sharing this experience 3 weeks after it had happened. And I think there's my motivation when it's a more public kind of being seen in that experience. There's much more of a motive of service in that. Like I really want, anyone listening to this or watching this who has lost someone they love, or they know that they will, or perhaps they're estranged or not in communication with someone they love, and there's some way that they might be able to reconcile that relationship while the person's still living. But I'm thinking about like more in contribution than I am. It's more of a giving than a receiving, even though I know that I'm receiving by giving, but I think putting together a small intentional kind of ceremony that's devoted to that with a few people is much more an act of receiving, even though the people present would probably benefit too in just, the shared heart of those moments.
Well, I mean, as an example, I'm sitting here with you, right? I still have my dad, but for me, and I'm sure many of the people listening or watching this episode can relate in some degree to what I'm about to say, but I had a pretty rocky relationship with my dad growing up, and now I have an incredible relationship with my dad that's getting better month by month, year by year. And there's still some things that happen here and there, but because we're committed to making our relationship work with each other, and we're both committed to working on ourselves, that relationship continues to grow and strengthen despite challenges and things that come up. And just hearing what you're saying about your dad and knowing that context, which I would like to get into a little bit about, like the background context, the trauma and the healing and the making amends and balancing out, not perpetuating the victim mentality while still honoring the fact that you were victimized at various points and navigating all that. But there's just so much beauty and richness here. Just even hearing you articulate the little things with respect to your dad, where I'm like, I can find that within me. I can find that in my relationship with my dad, not only my relationship with my dad, my relationship with my mom, who I'm estranged from, my relationship to my kids, just relationships, period, as a human being. And it's a beautiful gift. It's a gift, man. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And I would like to comment on one of the things that you said, because what came up for me, I just love to hear your thoughts on this, is like, I know you and I share a lot of the same perceptions on like the nature of this reality, the purpose of this life. There's this purposeful forgetting process that we go through to sort of deepen the one mind's experience of itself, right, in a bunch of individual, unique ways. And trauma and hardship and pain, and to a degree, in some cases, maybe suffering, and all these so-called negative experiences, if we can recognize them as catalysts, serve to our benefit. And I'm thinking on that moment that you're describing of you with your dad just rowing that boat. You have a 30-second video, and it sticks out to you so much because all of the things that are unspoken leading up to that point, that is literally the purpose of this life as I see it. It's on the surface, the act of sitting with another man rowing a boat, like you said, seems mundane and really unimportant. But because of all of the hardship, the trauma, the back and forth, the expanding, contracting, the relationship dynamics, and all of the things, the good and the bad across that whole spectrum, that add to the context of what has led to the act of rowing a boat with your dad, him looking at you in the eyes, makes that experience so incredibly rich. And I think that's the whole point of it all. That's like a perfect micro example that is the point of this whole experience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like, I can't help but think that as you were saying that, I'm like,
So true.
that's it, man. That's
so
the whole
true.
point.
Well, yeah. You know, thinking back to that moment and the deeper meaning behind it, thank God our soul contract with ourselves and with one another, however that was meant to play out, was fulfilled. We both honored our commitments to ourselves and to one another. And when I was in the hospital and my dad was he was on life support for a day or so, and then he had in his will that he didn't want to stay that way. So once everyone was there, they took him off life support, and he, true to his character, just his body kept fighting for a couple more days, which was wild. So I had a lot of time to spend with him, not being there, but still partway there, just kind of in the bardo, and that was a whole other thing that we can talk about. But something that was very clear to me was that he completed the mission. And what I think that mission is, to your point, is it's remembering who we are, who we really are, and remembering or learning how to love. Not to love in the romantic sense, but to love all of reality.
Yeah.
Unconditionally. And he got there. He got there. That's what I kept telling him, and he's, I guess part of him's still in his body, and probably a much larger part of him is somewhere in the ethers just hanging around. And I just kept going, dude, you fucking did it.
Yeah.
Just celebrating with him that he did what I think he came here to do. He remembered.
Yeah.
By the time he left, he had gone from a deeply traumatized little boy to a violent, angry, abusive man, to answering his soul's calling to really commit himself to healing and reuniting with the connection with God that he lost when he was a kid. And I mean, I don't know what else you could ask for out of an incarnation, right?
Right.
If you get that done, you won the game. You know that, I mean, really,
Right.
you won the game, man, especially if you signed up for such adversity in the family system that you chose. And you chose a really challenging, distorted system to enter into. I mean, that in and of itself, just choosing to come in to a dynamic that's going to offer the most fertility for your soul's evolution. Not the easy one, the hardest one, because you know the hardest test is going to provide the biggest gains in consciousness if that's what you're about. And I know that's what he was about. He didn't know that for a long time, just like I didn't know it, but I'm sure in the end he sussed that out. And he became a really loving, kind, patient, understanding, compassionate person. And he was not that way for a long time. And so, I mean, it's like, I don't know, you know, you're a sports guy and I'm not, but I think of it, if this thing is a game, right? It's like, that's the World Series. That's the championship. You're there on life support, and you know, this is kind of the final analysis. It's the scoreboard is going to be read in any minute now, right? And where did that scoreboard land when the essence of who and what you are leaves your physical form? You know, that's kind of boom. The clock stops right there for this particular game. And what was your score? And he had a really high score. Mm-hmm. You know, he was a fucking MVP. He did it. And in the recognition of that and the appreciation of that, I've always erred more on the side, you know, my ego is more on the inferior, like self-loathing side than it is the grandiosity, superiority kind of thing. So like I've struggled more to love myself than I have other people. But knowing that he and I are so intertwined in DNA and spirit, appreciating him in that regard and just acknowledging what he managed to accomplish within himself is helping me see and appreciate my own progress too. So I think one of the downsides of being someone who's very growth oriented is we're always looking at the next thing that we need to overcome. There's always limitations. There's always some, you know, degree of distortion or variation from who we truly are and the highest expression of ourselves. And so, you know, myself coming out of many years of really terrible drug addiction and alcoholism, I'm just wired to always be scanning the horizon of my life for where am I still squirrely? Where am I out of integrity? Where am I asleep and unconscious? And so because of that proclivity, it's difficult for me to stop and actually take inventory and credit myself for the progress I've made, of how far I've come. I just think, oh yeah, whatever. I moved past, you know, I was a heroin addict. It's like, oh yeah, whatever. I got through that. What's next? You know, and now I'm like really hard on myself because I'm on these fucking nicotine thing. You know, it's just like having to accept that there is no perfection in this life.
Right.
And yeah, would I like to not be addicted to nicotine? Very much. It actually does really bother me. Just because I don't like feeling dependent on something outside of myself to feel whole, complete, capable, me, comfortable, etc. But it's also really healthy to go, okay, cool. Like we can set those goals and really start to refine our character and get really clean. You know, there is an eye of the needle to be really clean and impeccable in your word and your deeds and the thoughts and feelings you have about yourself and other people, and to truly move toward that highest expression of love. That is important. And I don't know why else we would stay here in this, you know, physical form. But man, there's so much value in also, if you can do so without your ego assigning credit to the progress you've made, but there is so much to be said for like tracking back in time a bit and going, okay, wow, you know, like we're not perfect, but holy shit, what a tremendous amount of progress we've made. There's a lot of points on the scoreboard, dude. Like, let's acknowledge that. Let's not, you know, let's not rest on our laurels. Okay, there's always work yet to be done, but I think for me, this kind of spiritual perfectionism has been a real limitation. And so in seeing that, you know, even though my dad was certainly no saint by the time he died, I mean, he was pretty damn close. Pretty close, dude. You know, I never heard him say anything negative about anyone except Democrats. You know, he was like constantly looking for ways to contribute and to be of service. Mm-hmm. He's really generous in spirit and time and energy and money and everything, you know? Mm-hmm. So to be able to kind of reflect back to myself and go, man, just, you know, give myself a little credit here. Absolutely. And not be so self-critical, mm-hmm. which is something he really struggled with too. You know, he never felt like he was making the progress that he wanted to in terms of his internal work. And the funny thing about my dad's journey, man, is like, and I know he's totally free of this now, he had a very difficult time getting out of the mind. Mm. And in all of his, you know, therapeutic and self-help and spiritual pursuits, he was very caught in trying to overcome his obstacles using the thing that was the obstacle, which was the mind.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I, for some reason, have had an easier time divorcing myself from the mind. I mean, I don't know. I guess he worked on himself for a long time, but I've been meditating for, I don't know, almost 29 years, you know, in a pretty committed way. Some powerful plant medicine experiences and so on. So I'm pretty adept at observing the mind mm-hmm. as something other than me. The witness perspective in me has been cultivated for a long time. Mm-hmm. And that was one thing I think that he did struggle with. That was a bit of a limitation. He was always trying to figure out what was wrong with him rather than just releasing. Yeah. You know, no, there's nothing wrong with him, but releasing the limitations and releasing, you know, whatever it was that was troubling him. It's like just that the tendency of the mind, you know, it's just like a pit bull when you swing it on a rope, you know, it's like, it's not going to let go. You kind of just have to let it take the rope. And I've discovered that the mind is very much that way. It's like, it's so futile to try and fight it or to try to stop thinking. Totally. You know, to try to use the thing that's causing you the trouble to stop the trouble is super frustrating.
It's so crazy you're saying that because literally on the drive over here, I was reflecting on literally that exact thing, that a lot of people who are trying to figure out almost like obsessively in the holistic health consciousness space what is wrong with them don't realize that the problem is they're perpetually trying to figure out what is wrong with them.
Totally.
That's it.
100%.
Yeah.
That was very much his bag. And also on the physical side, you know, something about my dad that I've come to realize too is watching that video and kind of putting some timelines together. My old man, it's funny you have Alan Watts' book right there. That's my dad's name, Alan. Yeah. But my dad he was an OG biohacker, dude. I think he got, you know, he worked in excavating and stuff. So he was always around like early in life, heavy machinery, you know, tractors and equipment and guns, you know, like lead bullets and gunpowder, you know, it's just like a lot of chemical exposure. And so he got some sort of chronic fatigue or one of these, I mean, probably now looking back, I would assess that a lot of it was just emotional trauma manifesting through the body. But there was some physical toxicity, I think. And so
they're synergistic too.
Yeah. And he spent, you know, just decades trying to figure out what was wrong with him. You know, what is the problem? And so, man, he was doing hyperbarics like back in the 80s and had infrared saunas in the 80s. And doing essential oils and had air purifiers and like alkaline water machines. I mean, way back, you know.
Wow.
It's funny because you'll hear like Dave Asprey going, well, I invented biohacking. I go, you might want to talk to my dad. I mean, you might have invented the name, but there's been, you know, cats in the periphery of culture, you know, into what we call alternative healing and these different modalities for a long time, doing acupuncture. And I mean, just all of it. He was really a forerunner. I mean, he was, you know, his cabinets were full of supplements when I was a kid, you know. Even I remember, you know, those tiger milk bars?
Yeah.
Those like OG, those were like the first like kind of health bar that it wasn't a Snickers.
Yeah.
You know, you get them at the health food store, right? I remember when I was a kid, I mean, that's all we would eat. There was no like candy bars or anything, you know. So he was really into health and, you know, doing functional medicine labs. And I think a lot of my tendency to constantly be trying to fix myself like that, the way that I try to exert control on my experience is through trying to figure out what's wrong with me and then fixing it, you know? And I really, either he modeled it or it's just kind of something I inherited from him, but he was very much a fixer, and so much of his energy went into trying to figure out what's wrong with him, both physically, emotionally, mentally, etc. So great lessons in that, right? To see, wow, how much of that I'm still doing. And that gives me an opportunity, you know, to see how meaningless a lot of that pursuit was now that he's not in his body. Helps me to get perspective to see, wow, maybe maybe I'm attributing much more meaning to all of that, like fixing and controlling than I need to be while I'm still in a body. What if I just like let all that shit go and just live my life without so much rigidity?
Yeah.
And grasping, because I do a lot of that.
Yeah.
You know, and part of it is just like, I'm a curious experimenter.
Right.
And I just like to know how the body ticks and consciousness and all the things. So there's just, I think it's,
but there's a line.
It's one of the ways I serve the world. Like I'm like, I have a really good radar for interesting things that help you improve your life. And I like to try them out and experiment. And if they work, I love to amplify them and share them with people. So it's not like a right or wrong thing. It's more of a balance thing. Right. It's like, you know, I could see how ways in which he was out of balance that didn't serve him. And I think, man, I'm like a cookie cutter replica of him in so many ways that maybe there's an invitation for me to allow more balance.
But what sticks out for me, man, like as you're saying all this stuff, going back to the beginning of this part of the conversation, is how much when you speak about your dad, you're speaking from a place of seeing so much purity and so much good in him, and are reflecting back on him despite all these other things that you're bringing up. Like, yeah, he had a tendency to try to fix his mind and figure out what's wrong with him, which is the problem in and of itself, and all these things that you're revealing. But almost, I won't even say despite all of that, but also incorporating all of that, it's like, wow, he was so damn beautiful. And like, how much medicine is that for you as well? Because how did he likely see you? And you're looking at him like that, I'm sure in many ways, given what you do in the world, given your tendency much younger than him to work on yourself the way that you did and overcome what you came, did he look at you like, damn, I look up to my son?
Wow. So true. I mean, that was one of the coolest things about our relationship was, we both cultivated enough humility to allow each other to be teachers for one another. I mean, there were areas in life in which he had more expertise and experience and wisdom and discipline and all the things than I. But in the spiritual realm, since he got caught on the mind a lot, I was able to really help him in many ways. And he was very interested in what I had to say. And he was very interested in learning from me, which is really beautiful. I mean, I think that's part of, you know, you just kind of like, hopefully you evolve out of those roles that you assume as parent and kid, which are necessary. You need that structure, I think, to, you know, there has to be a hierarchy of kind of who's doing the leading. But as an adult, you know, I mean, I don't know, however many, let me see, 27, 37, 47. Yeah, I'm like, you know, 25, 30 years older than my dad was when I was born, right? So it's like, I'm way more together than he was when I was a little kid in so many ways. So now it's it had become more of a peer-to-peer brotherly sharing, even though, there's still a respect, and I still, honored him and really would go to him for advice, which is one of the things that I miss the most, really, because there are very few elders that I either know or trust. He's maybe the only one, really, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
So I got to look for that, I think.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's like we were both in so many ways each other's teachers, and that requires discarding of those roles.
Right.
Right. And just being like mano a mano kind of thing. And it was cool, man. I was able to really, for lack of a better term, teach him so much. Like when I was, in my early years of sobriety, well, not early, I mean, for the first 20 years of my sobriety, I was very deeply committed to 12-step programs and things like that. And he had been an alcoholic when he was younger, and then he just quit. Like he just basically white knuckled it, and just never went to any program or rehab or anything like that. And was very, very disturbed and miserable as a result, because he didn't address the underlying issues that caused the drinking to begin with. And then, I don't know, I mean, many, many years into my sobriety, I started sharing what I was learning in the 12 steps with him, and he started going to meetings and becoming, sponsoring people and speaking at the meeting and being the secretary. He really embraced the program, and it helped him so much, and I mean, had I not gone on that path, it's unlikely that he would have. And then as I started evolving and exploring other things like Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, turned him onto that, he went all in. We went to a retreat together in Florida a few years ago. It's one of my best memories ever, of course. And he goes back home to his little town in Colorado and forms a little Joe Dispenza study group in his little housing, community with other old folks in there. And they have their little weekly things, and they do the Dispenza breaths and meditations. I'm like, dude,
that's incredible.
So awesome.
So cool.
Especially because he was not a new agey guy. Right. I mean, you're talking about like a real rugged, he's a cowboy.
Right.
I mean, he's a rugged guy. Never a redneck, because he was too intelligent to be a redneck. But still, like,
but a rugged conservative,
country folk, hated like wealthy, stuck up people. He lived, most of his life in and around Aspen, Colorado. I always liked Aspen because it's just prettier and nicer stuff and good restaurants. He hated it because
I bet he's very opinionated on Aspen.
We hated the people.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
I mean,
there is a stigma and stereotype around that, though, too.
He hated superficiality. Yeah. And material attachment, that kind of elitist mindset. Yeah. He was much more comfortable around working class, blue collar people. I'm much more comfortable and resonated with those people much more. So this isn't your guy who's going to go to Costa Rica and do ayahuasca and whatever. But toward the end of his life, man, he's doing his Dispenza meditations, and then so he is very proud of me in my sobriety and very supportive, obviously, right? I mean, he's so stoked that I found my way eventually when I was 27, starting when I was 27. And so, I don't know, he never worried about me relapsing or anything like that. But a few years ago, when I started working in the plant medicine realm, which I did very carefully in the context of my sobriety and still do.
I'd like to talk about that too towards the end, because there's so much nuance in that. I think, space.
Dude, this might be a 6-hour conversation. I have so much, I'm passionate about so many things I've learned. But anyway, when I ventured into that realm in sobriety, I was very public about it, and because it's honest and real what I'm doing in my life. And if I find something that's been helpful and valuable to me, I feel compelled to share it with people, whether they're sober or not. So, anytime I shared about my experiences with psychedelics, I always, and I do the same thing today, give a caveat. Hey, this is my path of sobriety, and this is not going to work for everyone. It's working for me. I'll let you know if it's not. I'm not suggesting anyone that was an addict or alcoholic goes and takes mushrooms or whatever. It's just been the path for me. that path didn't start until I was about 22 years sober.
Mhm.
So I think that's a lot of the reasons why I haven't totally gone off the rails. There was like a very solid foundation of principles and understanding of the nature of addiction and recovery that I still carry with me as just part of my my whole makeup. But anyway, so I'm doing podcasts. I go to Costa Rica and I'm drinking ayahuasca and doing podcasts about the experience. And I know my dad watches my content, and I'm kind of waiting, you know, like, is he ever going to say anything about this? So finally, a couple of years ago, he calls me. I'll never forget. I was walking the dog down my driveway. Hey, Dad, what's going on? He said, hey, what's going on with this plant medicine stuff? So you're doing drugs again? I was like, fuck, I knew this was coming. Here we go. And so, you know, I have to go break down the entire context of this, you know, the difference between drugs and medicine and, you know, escaping and inscaping and, you know, the addressing trauma in a way that I never could, yada, yada, right? And so I think that kind of eased his mind. And really at the end of that, and this is something I said to someone that was a sponsor years ago in recovery, who didn't come at me with like a confrontation. It was more curiosity, just like, hey man, you've been sober for a long time and now you're doing this shit. Like, what's up with that? I'm so curious, like what you're up to. And I said to him what I said to my dad. I said, you know what? I'm really in the business of being honest with myself. After spending decades deluding myself almost to my demise, I'm really into being honest with myself and checking myself constantly. And so I said to my dad, I said, you know, I'm pretty sure I'm on the right path here because I'm able to be in a healthy, committed relationship. I'm more financially sober and secure than I've ever been. My business is flourishing in every way. I'm doing something about which I'm deeply passionate. I'm very successful in doing what I'm doing. I bought my first home ever. It's like the outside manifestations of how I'm living are the proof. By their fruits you shall know them, right? And so I said, just objective. And I wasn't trying to convince my dad or this other well-meaning person. I said, you know, it's interesting because I've looked at this myself, and every measurable metric of my life on the outside represents that I'm on the right path. I'm becoming more successful inwardly and outwardly from the moment that I, you know, entered into the plant medicine space as a sober person. So that's meaningful to me. Does it mean that like I'm enlightened now or that I don't have any problems or any of that? No. Conversely, if I was in a relapse, bro,
different.
I would burn my life down in, I mean, maybe days, certainly weeks, months, for sure, lose the wife, lose the house, career's gone, probably in jail, and very likely, no exaggerations, dead of an overdose or car accident or something, you know, like I know how it goes when I'm in active addiction. It is totally fucking out of control. And everything burns to the ground around me, including, and most importantly, all of my relationships. So the fact that I have deeper and healthier intimate relationships, and I'm not pushing anyone away, people are getting closer, you know, that was something I had to explain to my dad. It's a long story to say that I think that helped kind of ease his, you know, his concerns. And then he kept watching. And as the years go on, you know, I would say, you know, I've been much less frequent with those experiences, you know, actually less and less all the time. But he got curious. And so on his own volition, he went and started doing ketamine therapy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which is a pretty good entry point. If somebody doesn't want to do something illegal, it's, you know, you're supervised by a doctor and it's, you know, it's like very above board. And he did that for quite a while. I don't know how many sessions he did, but, you know, that was after he'd already been doing the Joe Dispenza meditation. So he was familiar with that place
Transcendental space.
out of space and time,
yeah.
right? He had spent some time in the quantum. So I can only imagine what his experiences were in ketamine for anyone that's worked with ketamine in any capacity. I mean, I've never like used it to party or something. I don't understand how people do that.
And that's one of the things I want to bring up is like this whole space towards the end. We'll say,
I mean, honestly, I've known people that have had problems with ketamine. I'm like, they do the ketamine spray at a concert or something. I'm like,
well, dude, even at like Austin gatherings, I see people doing that. And
bro,
it's
I'm like, how do you walk? I literally don't understand. But anyway, but the ketamine space is, I mean, it's very transcendent. You know, it's like Joe Dispenza meditation on fucking steroids. So, you know, one of the cool things I think about his journey and in some ways following it, and I don't know that he went and did ketamine solely because of me, but it definitely couldn't have hurt his decision-making process. But, you know, having him committed some years to that, the Dispenza meditations and then taking that experience into ketamine therapy, I am quite sure that that helped to assuage any reservations he had about death. Right. And just, I mean, he experienced when you're not like so deeply enmeshed with your physical body. And so the last phone call I had with him, he started asking me more about psychedelics. I was in the backyard and I recorded the call because I finally figured out there's an app that like you can get good audio. And so I'd like to record those phone calls, you know, with people that I love that are older. I want to have them on record.
Wow.
And so, so he's asking me, well, you know, what do these mushrooms do? And I go, well, here's the, you know, historical context. There's not a lot of it. And this is kind of how they work on the brain. And this is how, you know, they help with trauma. This is kind of what the subjective experience is like. And this is kind of the dosing. I mean, it went into some great detail. He's like, okay, what about ayahuasca? We start going through them, you know, well, that one, you know, is a little harder on the body and, you know, this and that. And there's more cultural and historical, you know, relevance to it. There's, you know, a longer kind of recorded history of use and yada, yada. And we go through the whole thing. And if he was maybe younger and if his social structure and dynamics were suitable, I probably would have opened some of those doors for him at some point, but I didn't feel compelled to do so because I didn't know that he had kind of the support and the context in his life and marriage that would be right for that. And I didn't want to be responsible for sending him off the deep end in that realm, but he kind of did it in his own way. But anyway, the greatest thing about all of that is when I was in the room with him in the hospital, I thought about that last phone call and I'm in the room, I'm taking some medicine, just meditating for hours, just sitting there waiting for him to leave his body. And I'm by myself in there a lot of the time because I just couldn't leave the room, you know? And I thought of that phone call and I was like, now you're the expert. Wherever you are right now, that's the answer to your question. And anything that I've done here in this earth realm to go there has got to just, you know, be nothing in comparison to what your experience is, where he's a little in the body and a lot not. And I was like, well, you know, it's just a funny moment we kind of had together, right? I was like, now you know, Dad, and I'll be finding out someday myself, you know?
Right.
But he, you know, he wanted to know what the psychedelic experience was like. And I said, you're having the ultimate trip right now, dude, wherever you are.
Yeah.
And I was too. I mean, I wasn't like in deep medicine, but I felt definitely compelled to take some medicine in that room because I don't know, on my own, I couldn't really get closer to where he was.
You wanted to sort of share that space that he was in, especially because he was sort of in this state where he's not completely gone, but still partially there. So it's like you wanted to sort of immerse yourself in that world almost as much as you could.
Yeah, it was wild because, oh man, well, bookmark pharmaceutical murder.
Yeah, I'll bookmark that.
So that's a whole other kind of depth to unpack. But he had a massive heart attack and was just passed out cold. Rushed to the hospital, and his brain had gone too long without oxygen, and so he was essentially brain dead, no brain function, and so he was, I guess, in a coma. And so, I got the call to go to Florida, where he lived in the winter, and it was like, yeah, he's not coming back from this, so you better get down here. I was like, oh, wow, okay. First thing I did was call my mom, which is thank you to myself. That was it. Probably the smartest thing I could have done. So I got to unpack in real time the things I wouldn't want to regret when her time comes, because I was already feeling them with my dad. So I got to express that to my mom, and she was, really loving and supportive, and it was just beautiful. Anyway, that was the first thing I did. So I get down to Florida, and he's in a coma, man. He's on life support. So he's on a ventilator, and forget what it's called, trifib or something that keeps the heart going. And as I said in his will, it was do not resuscitate. And so, to the credit of his wife, which is really very generous of her, I don't know if she bent that rule, but like to the letter, if you followed his wishes, was like, if I go, don't put me on any of that shit, I just want to go, know? And she wanted, myself and my brothers to have the opportunity to make it there, which I'm so grateful for. And I'm sure he didn't mind either. Yeah. Like I think I know at least that it was a much better send off to have his 3 sons, there, and stepbrothers too. So, so man, I remember getting to the hospital and walking in the room, and I'm just like, okay, dude, like this is it, Luke. Take a breath, because this shit is gonna be hardcore. And it was. So, this machine is really loud. Just crazy, dude. Just blue light everywhere, a Wi-Fi router right over his head. I mean, just noisy, no natural. I mean, I don't know.
Sterile environment.
I mean, just if you could create an environment antithetical to vitality with perfection, a hospital room would be it.
For real.
That said, if there wasn't that system that I'm always ragging on, my dad would have been dead before I got there.
Very good point.
So,
very good point.
There's a lot to be said for it. But yeah, he's essentially, there's confirmation, there's no brain activity. The spirit of the man is no longer using the brain as an interface to this reality.
Yeah.
I don't know what interface he's using, but his heart's still beating. So there's still a life force with his particular unique imprint in the body.
Yeah.
Which is really trippy.
Wonder if it's like on that note, because I've thought about how the heart relates to all that so much. Heart being the seat of the soul, is now that there's no brain function, and you've heard from people who've had near-death experiences or have even been in whether medically induced or non-medically induced comas for extended periods of time with no brain activity, that a lot of them have this experience of total expansion where they're still in the room, but they're observing it from all angles. They're hearing voices. So it's like they are purely in biofield form and not having to filter through the brain.
Yeah. So that was what I spent those 3 days trying to tap into, thinking about people that have out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, and so on. I mean, all the reports are, as unique as they are, they have some universality, and it is that omnipresence, omni-awareness, where they, they hear everything said in the room, they see who's sitting there, all that, right? So I believe that to be true. So as much as I'm already in the kind of shock and awe and grief of it, that it's highly unlikely that his brain's going to come back online to the point where he's using that interface. There is some interface of his biofield, that's still operational. So, my intention was to try and tap into that place where he was more than where I was, which is limited to the physical experience of this godforsaken room. And so, yeah, meditation was really as close as I could get to that. And taking a little medicine helped me to be in a deeper place of meditation. And also, I wanted to be as fiercely present for every second of that experience as possible.
Yeah.
And so being there and feeling into all of that was as close as I could get. And the real-time physical experience of it took some desensitizing, right? Because I would go touch him and like pat his head, and it's weird because like sometimes his eyelids would open, but there's like nobody home.
Wild.
And then it's kind of, I've never, well, maybe once in passing I saw a body, but never certainly up close for long periods of time.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's kind of scary. Like sometimes I felt like, what if he just like leaps up and,
Right.
You're kind of like, it's like you don't want to wake someone who's sleeping, but they're not going to wake up. It's a weird
Trippy,
space,
yeah.
dude. It's a weird space.
Can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's very trippy. And then when it was, mutually decided that, okay, everyone's there, now let's, take life support, then we moved over to the jurisdiction of hospice care, which is kind of like you kind of kick all the hospital people and doctors out, and then it's like, okay, we're the team that's going to come in and help this transition. And then weirdly enough, there wasn't a lot of like, okay, here's what you guys can expect, this is how it's going to go. They're just like, yeah, we're doing the thing now. And they didn't lack compassion, but just I think some context would have been helpful, because they took him off the ventilator and stuff and just very quickly unplugged him and just got out of the way so we could like have that moment. And then we're all thinking he's just gonna leave, and his wife is saying some beautiful we're all kind of, okay, you can go now, Alan, like you're free, yada yada, all this. And then he just starts breathing, dude, and it's like, I have come to know it's called the death rattle.
Wow.
How I found that out is because in the video I recorded with him, I was asking him if he'd ever seen a dead body or seen people die, which he had. And he described one particular instance in which somebody was, had lungs had filled with fluid, and he said they were still breathing, but it was the death rattle. And I was like, oh shit, that's what my dad had.
Wow.
So it's like this, I mean, the body's just like fighting and struggling. So the perception of that is that this body is really in a lot of pain and suffering. So to like move into the essence of what's happening is that his spirit is stoked there in the room with us, full of love and appreciation that we're all there with him. He's also watching the body struggle, but there's no physical pain. There's no brain and nervous system online to feel the pain, right? Yeah. So it's like you're with a version of someone that you've never known. And just waiting and waiting and waiting for them to become another version of them that you don't remember knowing, but you probably do pre-human this life.
Or it's some deep
that
level.
You're going to know again when you're also where they are.
Right.
So it's like this bardo, as the Buddhists call it, it's like this in-between place beyond the veil. And I mean, that was just, I don't know. It's like almost, it's so hard to describe because it's so surreal. It's so surreal just being in that, being in the in-between. In the in-between, yeah, it's kind of like Stranger Things. It's like this upside down, like, whoa, where are we exactly right now? But more so, where is he? You know, I was like trying to find him so that I could be with him in the most profound way in those last hours. And I think I was, as close as I could get without like doing a full medicine journey and just completely checking out, or checking in rather, more appropriately. yeah, that was it. When he died, I was listening to a Ram Dass lecture, and I was waiting for hours, and I would kind of like fall asleep a little bit and meditate, and I was watching the vitals on his monitors, and then I would like go on Chat GPT and like, what does like a 54 blood oxygen mean? And they're like, oh, go to the hospital immediately. I'm like, yeah, it already is.
It's already there.
Yeah,
Right.
so I'm kind of like doing research, like, you know, what's happening here? The heart rate is going up and down, and then the breathing, and then I started to notice, you know, after midnight, between like midnight and 2, like all those numbers started gradually kind of creeping down, and the death rattle, the breathing was getting like a little quieter, and I'm like, okay, something's happening here. And I was listening to that lecture, and I was like, it got real quiet because, dude, I had to have noise canceling headphones on because it was just so jarring listening to the body struggle. I mean, it's not fun.
Yeah. And was it almost like a feeling of, I know that he's not in there experiencing the suffering, but I don't want to remember that necessarily. Like,
It's just hard to divorce yourself from the surface level perception of it.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Versus what's the reality of what's actually going on, the perception versus the essence of it. The essence of it is like, oh no, he's in the process of like taking off a tight shoe. Like he's stoked. This is the best thing ever.
Right.
It's like he couldn't ask for a better outcome than to move on to the next level. So you know that, like in your deepest knowing, but what your eyes and ears and, you know, your emotions feel is like, oh my God, this person is like writhing in agony and pain. So yeah. And then at one point it got just, it's like, okay, the breathing got super quiet, and I kind of like took the headphones off, and I just saw the numbers just going boom, 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 and then everything hit 0.
Wow.
And I was like, I tapped my brother Andy. My brother Andy was there with me. Thankfully, it was a beautiful, you know, shared experience for us. And I was like, dude, wake up. Boom. And we stood up, and that was it.
Wow.
You know, that was it. And then you're standing there with the body.
I know you're texting me in that experience too a little bit.
I texted a couple of my friends.
Thank you so much for that.
I had to, it was so wild. I had to share it. I was just like, dude.
Right.
And it's funny because in those, like when I was texting you and I texted maybe 1 or 2 other people, I'm just like, whoa, this is like the experience. It was a way for me to integrate in real time.
Yeah.
But it's like way more hardcore now that the reality of the loss is hitting me than it was then. It was like, wow, it was more of like an interesting sort of spiritual experience or initiation, which is why I felt compelled to share it in that way. I wasn't like, dude, I need your support. Right. It wasn't like a grief thing. It was just like, whoa, this is kind of cool.
Right. Taking all the context you know about consciousness and everything. Like, okay, let's observe what's going on here. Try to make sense of it.
Hardcore. But there was also so much beauty in it in the moment. Yeah. You know? And that's what I was compelled to share at that time, because that's the most prominent part of the experience. Was just like, wow, we are in some deep ass waters in the realms of consciousness right now, man. You know, the soul experience I'm having is really profound, and I felt the need to share it with a couple people. But then it's funny because I think because I was holding it in that way, I think a couple of my friends have sort of discounted how fucking hard it is. Now. Yeah. So like, oh, he's holding this with a lot of grace, which I was and I am, but then now it's the human part, right? Yeah. Now it's like, oh man. Now it's the loss part of it. Whereas that in those moments I was aware of the loss, but it was just more like, man, how can I support this being in this delicate and profound transition? And just wanting him to know just how much of me was there. Yeah. To support him. Yeah. And it was cool, man. When he was out, like, you know, my brother Andy and his wife Paula. They're big Joe Dispenza practitioners, you know. And so we did a coherence healing, like a live one with some facilitators, and played it on the phone to my dad in there when he was still in his body. And then as he was being taken off life support, my brother put the Joe Dispenza music tracks on, you know, the pillow next to him. Funny memory I have of that is my brother put the phone up there. I'm like, dude, don't put the phone next to his head. You know?
Especially like with your understanding of EMF sensitivity, you're like, no.
I mean, that was funny sitting in there going like, okay, there's like this gnarly blue LED, you know, in hospitals. I mean, because the staff have to be able to see what's going on when they walk by, right? So there's like this gnarly blue light just like blasting him in the face, Wi-Fi router right up there. And it was great for me to sit there and see that, because it was like, oh my God, that shit doesn't matter. That is like so far from mattering right now. Not just because he was not coming back, but it's just life is so much bigger than any physical insult you could throw at it. You know, he could have been strapped to a fucking cell tower and it wouldn't have mattered, because where he was going is like so far superior.
Yeah.
And also impenetrable by anything harmful in this realm. Mm-hmm. You know, there were funny moments like that. But yeah, it was like, you know, knowing at least, or being pretty sure that he's in the room observing with that omnipresence, that he knows that music's on and he knows we're doing the coherence healing, and he knows I'm on my phone putting on FLFE on the room, you know, and I'm doing the things. He sees me taking some wachuma and eating some mushrooms. Like, we're having a thing in there. It's just not as tangible for me as it probably is for him. Mm-hmm. You know, because he can see what he's doing and what I'm doing, but only I can really see what I'm doing.
Right.
You know, so it's like it's kind of a one-way relationship of the to the experience with each other.
What a beautiful way to be sent off, though, you know? Did you notice a distinct difference, like, in the energetics of the room prior to the flatline and then the flatline itself?
Dude, that was one of the reasons. I mean, there's a multitude of reasons, but one of the reasons that I really wanted to stay there is I wanted to face that differential.
Yeah.
And it was not very pronounced.
Wow.
Yeah. It's something that's always been a curiosity to me. And when I thought that I would be able to have a kid, I always intuited that watching a baby be born would be something close to watching someone leave their body. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like that moment, it's this like 0 point moment of transference, like a radical transference of energy. I mean, not that the baby just becomes alive when it comes out, but it becomes alive to this realm. Mm-hmm. And I had an experience when I first moved to Texas, kind of in honor of my dad, a longtime hunter. I went hunting, you know, and I shot a big ass boar. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely the first big mammal that I've ever killed, and only. And I don't know that I'll do it again unless I have to. It's just not really.
Yeah, not your thing.
It's not really in my makeup to kill things. But a number of reasons I went. One is I really wanted to reconcile being a meat eater and like stop. You know, I wanted to make like a glass slaughterhouse. You know, because I feel like there's a dissonance in being so divorced from the process of taking a life to keep mine going. Mm-hmm. So anyway, there's a number of a lot of spiritual significance to why I went on that hunting trip. But the most profound moment by far was shooting that boar. Thankfully got a really clean shot, but it was still took a second shot that I think missed, but the first one ended up doing the trick. But I walked up to that boar and it was kind of huffing and puffing, and it was in its last moments of life, and I got hit, man, with such a powerful energy. I mean, it was like I was on psychedelics. This etheric, strange, nebulous kind of energy filled the air. I mean, everything got just slowed down 100x, and it was just weird. And I got so emotional. I mean, it was a profound experience, and what that experience taught me beyond any sort of mental construct, because I've already kind of believed this, but this became a knowing that death is an illusion. Death is a complete fallacy. It literally is not, and it's not something that exists in the reality, capital R. It's an illusion that's a construct of the reality.
Yeah.
But in and of itself, it doesn't exist. And I don't know how I came to know that in watching that energy move out of that body of that boar. But I think what it mostly was the feeling that I had. I was just like, oh shit, like something big is moving through me, man. And I think what it is that concentrated life force that's been uniquely tied to that corporal form just went and just became everythingness in the totality again. And I'm a couple feet away, and that everythingness moved through my body in a way that was very palpable. And I was like, oh yeah, I didn't, because there was like at first like the guilt around suffering, and I just killed something, and I was like, I didn't kill anything. You can't kill the thing that I was trying to kill. You know, you can't kill it because it can't die.
Right.
So to your point, I always suspected that if I was ever present when a human left their body, that it would be even more powerful than that, especially if it was someone for whom I deeply cared. And when he died, there wasn't much of that at all. There was a difference looking at his body.
Yeah.
For sure. That was like, oh, that's not even him anymore. Whereas when his body was still fighting to stay alive, there's a lot more of him still there. I mean, that's still my dad right there.
Yeah.
Even though not mentally. But yeah, I won't say it was disappointing, but it was just surprising. I really thought there'd be like this crazy sort of stillness that came over the room, or like a very marked contrast between before and after that moment, and there really wasn't, which was very, very interesting.
Do you wonder if it's like because his brain was offline, he wasn't having to filter through it, his field is in a more expanded state because of that, and because of that, it's more subtle as it dissipates outward. As
if I had to guess, that would be part of it. Yeah, I mean, I think, say he had been conscious and I'm holding his hand and he's still breathing and he's looking at me or says something, or we have some sort of shared moment, both like more tightly yoked to this realm, and then the lights go out. I sense, to your point, that it would have been much more palpable. But yeah, he was kind of already halfway there or more, and so there wasn't that big of a difference. But man, what a ride, dude. What a fucking ride.
What's up, you guys? I'm here with Matt Maruka, the founder of Raw Optics, to talk about something that I would say the overwhelming majority of people in the holistic health community totally overlook: light and circadian rhythm health.
All of our cells contain these organelles called mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. They make energy, they convert food into useful chemical energy. And it turns out mitochondria are largely controlled by our circadian rhythm. Our mitochondria are more active during the day under the influence of sunlight. When the sun goes away, our mitochondria have the opportunity to rest, repair, and regenerate when we're not being active. When it gets dark, the brain releases melatonin, and melatonin goes in and actually repairs the mitochondria, repairs all the oxidative damage that happens. Now, if we're exposed to blue light from all the artificial light sources, your phone, your iPad, your computer, your TV, the lead scientist we work with, Dr. Alexander Wunsch from Germany, actually calls it light doping. So people today are sort of being light doped by their employers with artificial blue enriched lighting to increase their productivity at the expense of their health, mental health, and long-term health and well-being. And so just by being exposed to artificial light at night can actually have a massive effect on the body's rhythm, cellular repair, and overall health and function. So we designed lenses that specifically block these disruptive wavelengths of light So that's why we created daylight lenses. They protect your eyes from the physical damage of short wavelength blue light, but also offer a bit of a protective and relaxing effect for your hormonal system as well, but not to the degree of the sunset lenses, which are designed to basically make you really tired and even kind of knock you out in the evening. So these are the two lenses we offer so that you can have protection at the right levels, in the right way, at the right time. And then sunset lenses, you wear these 2-3 hours before bed or just from the sunset until sleep, so that your brain can register, okay, the sunset, it's time for me to release that melatonin naturally so I can wind down and not have to use alcohol, weed, sleeping pills, and other things that so many people unfortunately have become dependent on because we're constantly disrupting our body's release of its natural sleep hormone.
So if you want to take control of your light and optimize your biology, head to the show notes or go to rawoptics.com and use code TWF10 at checkout for 10% off.
Most healthcare today operates on an outdated mechanistic model, treating the body like a battlefield rather than a self-healing system. You wait months for an appointment only to receive a rush diagnosis that labels you rather than truly understanding your unique health. Even in holistic health, many practitioners rely on endless lab tests and supplement protocols, addressing symptoms instead of the root cause. And the result? Another prescription or supplement regimen that merely suppresses or masks symptoms rather than facilitating true healing, whether the imbalance was physical, emotional, energetic, or a mix of all three. And that's why Dr. Tom Cowan co-founded the New Biology Clinic, to offer something radically different. As one of the most respected natural health doctors in the world, Dr. Cowan has spent decades challenging conventional medicine and advancing a deeper understanding of human biology, water, and natural health. His work isn't just about rejecting the mainstream, it's about offering a more truthful, biologically coherent approach for healing. The New Biology Clinic recognizes that health isn't about fighting disease, it's about restoring balance. You're not a diagnosis, you're an individual with a unique story, and healing should honor that. With virtual consultations available worldwide, the clinic offers a flat-rate monthly membership that gives you direct access to practitioners who take the time to actually listen. Members also get exclusive health live streams, a resource library, and live sessions covering everything from biofield tuning and breathwork to movement and meditation, all designed to support whole body healing. And if you're not ready for a membership, you can book a one-time appointment, sign up for an enrichment-only membership for the healing modalities alone, or schedule a free connection session with one of the care team members to see how the New Biology Clinic can help in your specific situation. This isn't about keeping you dependent on doctors. It's about making you sovereign over your health. Head to newbiologyclinic.com and use code THEWAYFORWARD, and that's spelled The Way, F-O-R-W-A-R-D, for $50 off account activation, or just head to the show notes for more info. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com for $150 off. Your body already knows how to heal, and New Biology Clinic helps you remember. The ride that you've been on with your dad, because he was on his own ride, and it's so cool hearing you describe how he was just like a true cowboy. Have you ever seen the movie Legends of the Fall?
I don't know. I mean, I'm familiar with, I probably back in the day.
You got to watch that movie again. That's what I picture your dad, like that sort of lifestyle.
You want to know what my dad was like when he was young? Look at an old Marlboro cigarettes ad.
Okay.
From like the 70s. That was my dad.
Okay. I'll probably look that up while you're talking here in a minute.
Or kind of when he was real rugged early in life, but then later, kind of a Kevin Costner Yellowstone.
Okay.
Because he became a little more sophisticated in business and things like that, and got involved in real estate. And
you're talking about like that.
Here you go. Yeah. That was my pops, dude. Yeah.
A little bit.
You put it in the show notes. Marlboro Man.
A little bit.
Yeah, it was just super cool. I have so many great like old photos of him, like stock car racing, snowmobile racing. He was a ski patrolman, forest search and rescue, rode bareback broncos, team roping. Awesome. I mean, just what a madman. But I got really into watching Yellowstone, even though it's, very corny and unrealistic in many ways, but I just like looking at Montana.
Yeah.
just like beautiful to watch. But also it really reminded me of my childhood because my dad, was so involved in horses and things like that. And so all those ranch hands and just moving cattle and all that kind of stuff. I was around that quite a bit when I was with my dad, which was not the majority of the time. I lived with my mom. But anyway, at one point I called my dad. I was like, "You watch Yellowstone?" I was like, "Fuck yeah, I watch every season, of course." And I was like, "How much of that is real, like the ranching stuff?" And he's like, "It's pretty realistic, except you'd never have." The only thing he said is like, aside from all the, shootings and the town corruption, like obviously that kind of stuff is super Hollywood, but I meant more like the life on the ranch part of it, because that's how he grew up. And he said it's pretty realistic, except you'd never have 5 or 6 guys running a couple hundred head of cattle. It'd be like 1 or 2 guys.
Yeah.
He's like, other than that, that's pretty much how it is, moving cattle around, disputes over land and water rights and all this kind of shit, and in the bunkhouse where you got all your cowboys that like work the ranch, and one guy's an alcoholic. He gets arrested for fighting at the saloon in town. Like all that kind of stuff is like very, very true to, the West.
Yeah.
Essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was like a cowboy through and through.
Yeah. And then he got a little more refined. That's why I think like the Kevin Costner character, he's a leader and, successful in his own right. Mm-hmm. But, he also didn't murder people or anything that I'm aware of.
Good. But so your relationship to him though, and we've alluded to it quite a bit during this, but this is the part that I want to get into because aside from all the medicine that this episode has already been, I mean, I'm over here freaking crying like 7 times. You're crying. This is so beautiful, man. And I'm honored to be having this conversation with you and that you're willing to do this conversation with me at this time.
I mean, this is what I consider to be integration.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's funny. It's like creating content in the way that I do, which is often quite personal. Sometimes I kind of wrestle with whether or not, I don't know. I mean, like narcissistic would be way too strong of a word, but it's like, oh, I'm talking about me and my life and my experiences. There's a part of it's like, who cares? You're not that important,
Right.
Which is true. But I think like the self-serving part of it is having conversations like this in the way that we're doing helps me to evolve and grow. And so like, I'm aware that that's what I get out of it. And I only just hope that other people benefit more than I'm benefiting from having such sort of a self-centric conversation.
Oh man.
I
mean, I can say like I have absolutely loved this so far. Again, Just finding those points of medicine for me, and it's been incredible. And that's why I'm so excited for this next part, because it's so pertinent to so many people, virtually every human being, because relationship dynamics can be so tough. And, there's so many of us, especially in the holistic health consciousness space, that have ventured into this space because we have been victimized at various points, or someone we know has been victimized, and we've seen the recovery on the backside of that, but balancing out the understanding that you have been victimized with not being in a perpetual state of victimhood, forgiveness, what does that really look like? And how do you come back into right relationship with someone? And I know all that is pertinent to this conversation with your dad, because we've had these conversations before. So
it is. That's a good observation though. It's like when I was involved in 12-step groups, we used to say something to the effect of, this isn't the winner circle. Like people end up here because it's the last stop on the train, it's the last stop on the line. And I think in the alternative health and healing space, sometimes we forget that if our lives prior to becoming interested in these kind of topics were going well, we wouldn't have ended up here, right? Like if you're physically super healthy, you have a healthy relationship with all your relatives, you don't have any resentments, you were never molested, whatever. Right. It's like the people that end up in these kind of spaces, it's largely because they're working on overcoming some big challenges.
Yeah.
Or they have overcome them and they feel compelled to kind of, go back onto the battlefield and try and pull some POWs out.
Yeah. Yeah. Be that example for other people for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, your relationship with your dad growing up, as much as you like want to share about that, what was that like?
Oh man, it was, my dad hurt me so deeply as a kid. And it's, it's funny just learning more about him and even watching that interview I did with him. When I was a kid, I felt like we were so different. We were just complete opposites. I was very intuitive, creative, artistic, very emotionally sensitive, soft, more feminine in nature. I was raised by my mom, mostly. And he was just so calloused and ruthless and angry, violent. And it's like we were just antithetical, or so it seemed. Later in life, I learned that he was exactly like me when he was a boy, and that the ways in which he was hurt were very similar to my experience. For whatever reason, I think it just has a lot to do with your personality type and various propensities. My reaction to hurt that I endured as a kid was to internalize it and destroy myself. His tendency was to externalize it and destroy other people through, violence. And so now I see my dad, even back when he was in that mode of, just being so abrasive and volatile and angry and abusive. It's like I just see his hurt.
Yeah.
I see the sensitive little boy under there that just had no way to process what he'd been through. So, but, without that hindsight wisdom, without all of the healing work that we did individually and collectively, he never, thankfully, he was never physically abusive to me, but he was so volatile, so angry, such a short fuse, that being around him was an experience of constant hypervigilance and just terror in my nervous system, because I never felt safe. I never felt safe. I didn't know he wasn't going to physically hurt me, right? Because I saw him be violent toward, I remember once he punched one of his horses, just cold cocked one of his horses one time, and he loved his horses. One time he basically like an African bushman, like speared one of his horses with a spade shovel.
Damn.
He got so pissed. Just breaking shit, just storming off in the car, just loud, screaming, swearing. It was terrifying to be in his presence. And so I felt like we were such worlds apart, whereas as a kid, I'm much more related to my mom, who was like very compassionate and empathetic and loving and demonstrative and affectionate. And she was just so sweet to me. My mom never, I don't know. I'm sure I really put my mom through the ringer when I was a kid, because I had so many behavioral problems and stuff. So, I'm sure there were times she was like pissed at me because I was acting out, but she was never abusive. She didn't have those kind of anger issues to take out on me. So yeah, all through my childhood, man, it was like terrifying. And also, he didn't know how to relate to me as a California kid, right? I grew up like smoking weed, listening to Black Sabbath, riding my skateboard, BMX bikes. Like, I'm not interested in hunting and fishing and riding fucking horses and following him around to rodeos. I mean, he was in the rodeo arena, no pun intended, for 15 years. I mean, team roping was like his life, to the point where he built a team roping arena on his property.
Damn.
He built like a rodeo grounds in our front yard, you know?
Literal cowboy.
Yeah.
Literal. Like literally a cowboy.
Yeah. So there's just, when he was a kid, the experiences he was sharing with me would have been a dream come true. Going to the rodeo, getting to, ride the team roping horses, going hunting, going fishing, going out into the backwoods, being in the wilderness. He would provide those experiences for me because he didn't understand me.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't understand me. And it must have been so heartbreaking for him to share something that he so deeply loved and to have me completely reject it and to reject him. And that was just a lack of understanding of one another. And so his passions lied there. The things he liked to do as hobbies, the things that he liked to do with me, the ways that he would share time with me were things that I hated. They were also things that I did not have the physical strength and fortitude to handle, because I didn't grow up like that. So, for example, if we went out fishing, my dad eventually had to abandon horses and just use mules exclusively, because the land that he liked to explore was, was too rugged for horses.
Mm.
So that, horses can handle some shit. But that just speaks to like, we're not going on trails.
Mm-hmm.
We're not like, oh yeah, let's go in like the, federal land and up this nice trail. My dad would like take a plane to find where the elk were and then blaze our own trail up into the mountains, up to timberline to kill the elk. You know what I'm saying?
That's wild. That is like beyond wild.
So since there's no trails, we would pack chainsaws and hang them off the mules. And when you came to deadfall that was too big for a mule or horse to jump over, we would chainsaw through the deadfall, like all the way up into the woods, which to some kids would be like, Huck Finn life, dream life, dream experiences. And now as an adult, like, man, I wish I could have shared more of those with him when I came to appreciate the natural world more. I just wanted to catch lizards and play with butterflies and look at flowers and just swim in the creek. I just like was a different way of kind of appreciating nature. So in those experiences, he was frustrated because I was so soft and kind of weak and scared and just terrified of having to jump over a big log, or the sound of the chainsaw, or killing big animals and the blood and the guts. Like, it was just terrifying to me. So he was frustrated by the fact that I couldn't keep up and was very abusive as a result, and probably hurt that he couldn't connect with me.
Yeah.
Because I just wasn't interested. If he wanted to take me to like a Judas Priest concert and like smoke some weed and, drink some beers out in the parking lot when I'm 12, we got something going. But, going and shooting a bear out of the tree and then taking her cubs home and putting them in our kennel and having a pet bear wasn't really,
right.
we're
interested.
Outside of my kind of cultural, world. So to be more specific, I didn't realize, until I don't know how old I was, probably the second series of ayahuasca ceremonies I had, which would have been probably 2018, I think. I'd worked through a lot of things with my mom in my first series of ayahuasca ceremonies, which was not really about abuse, just more about I don't know, just some issues of neglect and just each of us going through our own kind of issues and losing her when I was 13, getting sent away and kind of never having a mom again in that sense. And, just different things. I mean, we all have like our things that, imprinted us as a kid, but I made it through like a whole first week of ayahuasca, not really thinking about my dad. And then a lot of what I learned too in that first one was how I was recreating certain dynamics in my romantic relationships that were an exact blueprint of the dynamics with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't need to get into detail on that because it'll take too long, and my mom's very private. So I've learned to, not speak about her so much in public.
But you see that type of thing happen regardless of what the intricate details are. Like when you don't heal the wound related to something on either side of your parents, that starts showing up in your relationships until you learn to address it.
I had an incredible ability to replicate the relational dynamics with my mom in my relationships in a dysfunctional way, not the good part of the relationship. Right. So anyway, I kind of thought, well, I'm golden. Like I've worked through all my parental shit. And then I got into a relationship that was a very different dynamic, but also dysfunctional. And it was very painful. It was the first time in which I was more the needy attachment kind of partner. Yeah. I'd always been like the avoidant, push them away, like, that kind of thing. And now the tables had turned, and all of a sudden I was the one who was like more needy and kind of more the abusee than the abuser. But I'm used, it's not as dramatic as it sounds, but just kind of, I was with someone who's kind of mean and volatile. And anyway, figured out in that ayahuasca ceremony that I had so much work left to do with my dad. And so I had gravitated toward a relationship that fit the dynamics of my childhood relationship with my dad, which I didn't even know was possible because of the gender roles, right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, you meet, if you're a man and you're heterosexual, you're going to get in relationships with women to work out your mommy shit, right? And I did that pretty fucking well. And then that series of ceremonies, after that relationship had ended, showed me like, oh, dude, you got you got 50% of the pie pretty well taken care of, but we're going to show you what happened with your dad. And what I saw, over the course of those few days was like how devastated I was by the abuse from my dad and just how deeply it hurt me and just warped me and shaped me. And it was hardcore. And I think you just normalize whatever your experience is, but now being an adult, even though, as I said, I don't have kids yet, if I see your kids or someone else's kids that are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I think about the way my dad behaved just with them in the room is psychologically damaging.
Yeah.
Even if it's not directed toward them.
Yeah.
I mean, just the energy field of rage and anger and just unregulated nervous system and unmitigated, rage. It's like the energy of that is so harmful to the human psyche, especially when the human psyche is walking around in theta, before 7, 8 years old, especially trying to like find their place in the world and starting to create those imprints in the brain about what's safe, what's not safe, right?
Yeah.
Everything becomes unsafe because your entire world, which is your parents, are unsafe.
Yeah. Then
that's the worldview that we carry as adults. And that's the worldview that I had as a result of what I went through with my dad. And it's all subjective. I mean, I know people that, had it way worse, but for me, there is no like worse or lesser in trauma. It's very subjective. It is
very relative to your own experience.
Yeah, relative. That's the word. Yeah, it's like, I always quote Bob Marley, every man's burden is the heaviest.
Yeah.
So to me, being screamed at, being yelled at, being called a loser, being called a pussy, I don't know if you ever called me a faggot, but something equivalent of that. My dad wasn't like homophobic, but something like that. Like whatever your total pussy would be,
Yeah.
I mean, just terrorized me and completely annihilated any chances of self-esteem.
Yeah.
Which is ironic because he was trying to make me tougher and build me up to be a man because he knows how scary and dangerous the world is.
Yeah.
But he just didn't have the wisdom to know, actually, I'm a really sensitive kid. I need nurturing. That's how you can make me stronger, is by building me up, not by tearing me down. But this was all projections from his childhood and his low self-worth and self-esteem. And so I went my whole life with him totally ignorant of the impact of his behavior. And I think it was largely bypassed because we'd both been doing so much work on ourselves, right? And he didn't behave that way anymore to anyone, let alone me. I mean, we loved each other. We were close. We had really, cultivated a beautiful relationship. So I guess I kind of assumed that, whatever that shit, when I was a kid, we've kind of, it's been talked about enough and felt enough. And we both changed. So you don't really need to go back and like address it. But that was one of the most beautiful gifts of ayahuasca for me was, man, just laying there for hours going, holy shit, like this guy really hurt me worse than anyone in my childhood, really, because it was such a long period of time. So that's how homie was when I was a kid. But the interesting thing is that my acknowledgement of that over those few nights and just really feeling that, I had already forgiven him, even though I didn't really grasp the depth of harm. I had already forgiven him preemptively. So when I felt those things and saw those things with more clarity, there wasn't really any forgiveness to be had. It was more about self-compassion and seeing like, oh, dude, no wonder you've been the way you are. Look what happened to you, man. And then on a deeper level, why was he like that? Holy shit, look what happened to him. I mean, my childhood was a freaking cakewalk compared to my dad's. Seriously. I mean, I had some really bad shit happen to me when I was a kid. But hearing my dad's life story, I mean, he was just tortured for, I don't know, basically his whole childhood till he left home in various ways. So, but I think facing those things and reconciling them has been a really key to my my growth. And also looking at that piece in particular is what looking at it and healing broke the cycle of attracting women that replicated either my mom or dad dynamic. Allison being the first one that I've had that's not either of those.
Incredible.
Which is like a powerful affirmation, not that I'm, totally healed or enlightened or anything, but that my willingness and capacity to go into those really painful, dark corners and nooks and crannies of my childhood experience with my parents has set me free from having to replicate them again and again and again in order to work them out. Like it got my attention eventually, is what I'm saying, through the way I navigated relationships and hurt so many other people and got hurt myself. But what's cool is now I see sometimes very subtle artifacts of those dynamics in my relationship, but they're not really operational and they're not primary. They're just artifacts. I'll see, for example, my wife will get pissed at me and I'll feel myself get like recede a little bit and get kind of scared.
But you can observe it and notice it.
And it's like, oh,
that's where that's coming from.
That's the dad thing, or I don't know, I'll feel her calling for more presence or intimacy or something. And I feel like I want to back away or I need more space or something. That was my mom thing, but they're very, very subtle. I mean, I have to really be paying attention, but
you've addressed those wounds and now know the characteristics of them.
Well, now the difference is they don't control my behavior and they don't control the outcome of my life or my relationships. But it doesn't mean that those neural pathways are completely erased. It just means that new ones have been created where I'm able to very quickly remind myself that I'm totally safe. Like if Alice and I ever have some sort of conflict, which is rare, and if we do, honestly, it's diffused very quickly. But, two people living together, shit's going to come up. I'll feel myself be afraid. Say she's like, oh, hey, you know what? You can find some time later. Like, I need to talk to you about something. And I'll be like, feel my heart.
That's one of the scariest things that anyone says, though.
Dump, right? But then the adult in the room, the observer, comes in and says, she's not leaving you. She's not going to hurt you. You're in this for life. She's just asking for presence. And she's not feeling heard, felt, seen, or you've gone unconscious in some way that's not working for her. And she's going to do you the favor of bringing that to your attention so that you can rise to be the man that she knows you can be. It's a totally different orientation. But still, that little boy's like, I'm in trouble.
Right.
I got to hide. I still see it, but it's like, so I see it so quickly and it's so fleeting and sort of devoid of inertia and energy that it's just like, oh, okay, that's cute. No, let's be who we really are today as the man we are, and let's show up for this and address what needs to be addressed. And, yeah, sometimes it's uncomfortable. There's still that part of me that says, oh, you got to explain yourself, show her you're right, make an excuse, prove her wrong, punish her back. It's just like, okay, thanks for sharing. Now I'm just going to sit and I'm going to breathe into my, base.
Yeah.
And keep my heart totally open and just take whatever arrows feel like arrows and know that they're not.
Yeah. They're not even arrows.
They're just a request for more of me. Yeah. It's incredible, dude. I mean, in the context of relationships, like what can be shit that would have like nuked a relationship in my past can be so easily diffused. I mean, at least on my behalf, by simply just listening and keeping my heart open. Yeah. And just, that's been one thing, someone said on my podcast years ago, I was interviewing a couple and, I was like, this is when I was really struggling in that arena. I mean, oh my God, dude, we could do a podcast about that another time, but whoa, for how developed I was in my, 40s to late 40s in other realms of life, it is shocking to me how dysfunctional I was in terms of romantic relationships and sex, and like, whoa. So this couple said, I'm like, how do you guys do it? You seem happy. Like, I'm fucked in this area. And they're like, one of them said, no matter what happens, I made a promise to myself that I won't close my heart. I don't know. It sounds kind of trite.
That's it.
But in practice, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Provided you're with someone that's not going to take advantage of the fact that you refuse to close your heart.
Right.
If you're with someone who's unconscious, they'll use that against you and actually hurt you. But I'm with someone who's very self-aware and conscious and such a beautiful, kind, loving person. Even if I feel like I'm under attack and I want to like recede and shut down and armor up, no. You made a promise to yourself for your own evolution, Luke. Do not close your heart. And I've been pretty good at that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at that. I've never really had a resentment towards my wife. I've never really been mad at her. She's been mad at me quite a few times. But honestly, I fuck up more than her. I go unconscious. I get dumb. I do stupid shit. I really do. I'm not being self-deprecating. It's the truth. I mean, she really doesn't make mistakes. And sometimes I do. I mean, she makes her own mistakes for her life, but not ones that affect me or our relationship ever. She just kind of has her shit together.
I think there's something about that though, where because you have done so much work to heal the mother and father wound and address some of the other aspects of your life that have, traumatized you, so to speak, your field is not coming from a position of attracting more of that into your space, at least not to the degree that it was before. So you can feel confident in having an open heart because the energy that you're putting out coinciding with having an open heart is one of being very aligned. So then you don't have to worry as much about attracting into your space those who would prey on the fact that you have an open heart, at least not in an intimate way. The one question that I had, does that sound resonant?
Yeah. I mean, that's actually something I've been kind of slow at, discernment.
Yeah.
Discernment. That's one of the main lessons that I learned from Allison. She is masterful in her discernment of people, situations. I feel like I would be lost without her guidance on the spiritual realm, because to your point, I have definitely like improved, but there have been a few, Trojan horses have made it through the gates, across the moat since I've been married. And Allison has firmly at times, but always lovingly brought that to my attention. Like, wake up, man, cause I'm like, I don't know, kind of peaceful, low conflict guy. And I think because of where I came from in addiction recovery, I have a lot of grace for people, I know like where I came from versus where I am today is a massive chasm. And so I know if someone's super distorted and fucked up, if they have the one single ingredient of willingness and, and humility, and they want to evolve and change, I give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
But my naivete has been, not everyone wants to change and evolve, right? And sometimes where someone is where they are, and they have no desire to be anyone else or anywhere else. So Allison's much better at that. Like, not feeling this situation or this person and stuff. But
but in more intimate relationships, though, that's what I'm meaning. Like, when you're with someone,
I mean,
obviously, like interpersonal dynamics out there, that's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one. Yeah, I guess really like when there was a pivotal moment at which I had to make a decision as to whether or not I was going to make Allison my partner, to be wife kind of thing. And in that moment, I did have very accurate discernment about who she was and what she was about, and that we would be good for one another. And that was a really sound decision that I didn't have any help with, right? It was based on a lot of that healing work and seeing the patterns that I kept perpetuating. And I was able to see her in a very specific moment. And I was like, this ain't the pattern. This is none of those patterns. This is a new pattern waiting to be established, a fertile kind of template for a new kind of way of relating, because there's someone in front of me that's very available to that, So yeah.
How have you navigated the understanding that in your life, even outside of your mom and your dad, because I know like the background context of the deeper parts of your story, of which you've shared elsewhere, so that's public. How have you navigated having been victimized in a variety of ways while not maintaining a perpetual state of victimhood, and also not using that as an excuse to project your wounding onto other people? That's a big question, I know.
Oh man, it's crazy. The relationship I've had with forgiveness has been so interesting and dynamic, and continues to be so, especially in light of why I believe my dad died, which we can get into. Oh man. At different levels of my development, I've been able to have true compassion and empathy toward different people that perpetuated harm on me, whether intentional or not. Parents, relatives, pedophiles that molested me when I was a kid. And I've been, pretty aware of spiritual bypassing and kind of rose-colored glasses. So I don't do that a lot, but it's kind of like the stages of grief, right? There were points at which I became aware of like, whoa, this hurt me way worse than I thought. Then I'm like, feel kind of pissed off, kind of. Feel like I want retribution, justice. I want to see the people that harm me harmed in return. Want to retaliate, punish them, all that stuff, right? And then moving into, well, what happened to them? Especially like with one of the two people that molested me. I mean, it was like pretty early in my recovery. I was able to see, oh, well, I mean, this must have been happening to them. There was something in their experience that was missing, and they were seeking that out with me as a little boy, you know, and I could kind of see, I mean, again, for anyone that's had that experience and you're at a different place in your journey, I'm not minimizing anyone's experience. I think sexual abuse is, I don't know if it gets any worse than that, you know, in terms of like
hard.
imprinting your psyche in ways that are in some ways irreversible, really. I mean, I don't know that I'll ever be completely whole. And I've kind of just come to accept that. But it does provide a lot of grist for the mill. But there were stages where I saw, okay, this person had some unfulfilled needs, and they were trying to fulfill them in a very distorted way that had that caused me a lot of damage. And then, though, playing it forward, this is very meta, you know, playing it forward. Well, had I not been damaged in that way and been so disconnected from myself, like my inner sense is something that came to me in a journey one time. I was like, wow, that man really, or that he was a boy at the time, really like robbed me of my innocence. What does that mean? And I thought, well, it's more of an inner sense. It's like I was robbed of the sense of who I am, where boundaries, like where I end and where someone else begins. And like, who am I as this little boy named Luke Storey, and how do I relate to other kids and all of that, right? So it's like, God, what a horrific crime, truly. But because of that, I sought out addiction as a means by which to cope and try to find that inner sense, right? To find a connection to something greater, to the cosmos. I was using drugs and music to try and tap into a larger feeling of consciousness and belonging, which was in many ways a beautiful experience. I mean, a substitute and a facsimile of the true experience, but it got me through childhood without suicide, right? And then the beauty in addiction is that it leads to either death or surrender. There's two outcomes to addiction, death and surrender. And how fortunate I was and am to have been shown the grace to arrive at surrender rather than death. And so I could look back on a molester and say that molester ultimately led me to God, because where surrender leaves you is with nothing but God.
Yeah.
Right? So there's like, whoa, I can zoom way, way out, and I can keep zooming.
Yeah.
You know, it's fun. It's a really fun practice to go, wow, let me like step out of my personal attachment to the way I see this thing. Let me widen the lens as much as possible to see the biggest context from as high of an altitude as I can possibly achieve, and then kind of work my way through the strata of that altitude and look at it from different perspectives. So going to the high altitude for me early on in terms of forgiveness and reconciling ways in which I was hurt as a kid was relatively easy, just because of my worldview and my relationship and consciousness and just how I understand karma and incarnations, and just kind of my worldview allows for finding the meaning in a person hurting another person.
Yeah.
Then going back in, which, man, especially with like the sexual abuse, like I said, I don't know if there's an end point where you're kind of done looking at it. It's not something I want to fixate on. Like I'd rather it didn't happen and just move on, right? But at one point I started looking at, a lot of this has come through medicine work. At one point I started looking at that forgiveness piece, and I felt very reconciled in my unconditional forgiveness of the perpetrator. And looking beyond what may have happened in their experience that motivated them to do what they did, the ways in which they were hurt, and like having that compassion, which is pretty low-hanging fruit, I started looking at the forces of evil that possessed them or motivated them to do what they did. And it's like, oh, that's a whole other level than just a damaged human psyche acting out their hurt on another person in some warped attempt to heal.
It's almost like a damaged human psyche allows for Wetiko, mind virus, whatever you want to call it, that to enter in and distort that individual's expression.
Yeah. So then, I hit a real stumbling block at one point. I don't know that I've totally overcome the block. I think I'm climbing up toward the top of it where maybe I can see over it. But it's that, wow, okay, sure. There's the human part of it. Hurt people. But then there's the side of duality that we call evil, moving in on that vacancy within that person and motivating him to commit, really atrocious acts toward other people. And then I got to kind of a precipice there where I was having a difficult time forgiving evil as a general energy that exists in this realm. I could forgive the person, but it's like, what's behind the person that did that to me? Fuck you, actually. Then this like wave of anger that I'd never even felt came. It's like, what kind of world is this? And then, again, back to my worldview, I'm pretty sure that consciousness or God, in order to know itself fully, has expressed itself to infinity on an infinite spectrum of what we would perceive to be good and evil, right? Or love and evil. And if I'm going to forgive the principle of evil that motivated certain people to hurt me, then that would mean I'd have to forgive God for expressing itself as all of those things. And that's difficult to do, because the more myopic perspective is, why can't I just live in a realm that's pure love and light without duality? Why am I here doing this shit, being molested and like reconciling all of the suffering in the world and at large and the collective and the suffering within myself? And the only real resolution I can find in that at this point, and this is always evolving, is that that this game of duality in this earth realm is a gift that I chose to receive by agreeing to come here and enter a body and have a human experience. It's kind of like when we're looking at our tacit agreements with the government. It's like you go through phases of like, oh, I'm really pissed at what they're doing to me. And you realize, well, you signed all these contracts your entire life unknowingly, and you were duped into those contracts, but still there's an element of responsibility in that, right? It's like, I'm the one that's signed away jurisdiction for my life. And in the same way, my soul kind of signed away jurisdiction by entering this realm. Yeah. And I've agreed, because I believe there's enough value in this experience for my evolution to come play in this realm where evil is a very real thing. And so if God or consciousness expresses itself in one of the many ways, or infinite ways that it expresses itself, as this material world that we're playing in while we're alive, the only way I can really reconcile that is that the realm and the opportunities we have in this realm are a gift from God to itself, for it to find a way to become, in a sense, other than what it is and drift very far from its true essence, to give part of itself, which is right now called a Luke Storey, the opportunity to play the game board and get back to what it actually is.
Amen.
Right? I mean, it gets heady, but this is just part of it's the roller coaster of forgiveness, of just all these, this is years and years of like looking at this from every angle. And part of that just going like, man, is there ever going to be a day that goes by in my life where I don't have the awareness that I was molested? It doesn't matter, like, I don't know how many levels on which I heal that. There's like there's no undoing that, regardless of how deeply I'm able to reconcile that or understand it or accept it from the immediacy to the ultimate meta highest perspective. It's really difficult to divorce myself from a positionality that's good, bad, right, wrong, evil, love. It in the end, or at least the end that I'm at now, is it just is.
Mm-hmm.
It just is. It's a neutral event. It's a neutral life experience. At worst. At best, it's all an expression of love, even in the suffering and the loss, because of what it calls forth from me.
Mm-hmm.
That ultimately, even though I experienced firsthand a manifestation of evil, all that it's done is drive me further into love.
And you saw that as an opportunity at some point. And that's the thing. Like, it requires that. I don't want to speak to your experience on that. I'm just speaking on
extrapolate, man.
Relationally, the things, although I have had some similar experiences in my life, on that note, I've not been public about them, and I've not been public about them yet.
No, you just were.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
you know what I mean. But like, I'm talking about on the details of, on that note. But the way that I look at it, and you tell me what you think about this, is like, if you can both recognize that you have been victimized and give yourself the grace and the compassion for that, while also recognizing that the individual who did those things, overwhelmingly, in almost all cases I can think of, they themselves were also victim to something just as bad, if not something worse, and might not have had the tools to deal with it. While also recognizing that, okay, that is no longer happening to me right now, so I have to do the work in order to reconcile that, so I'm not projecting that onto other people or perpetuating in that into the world, and holding both at the same time. And then also ultimately recognizing this as an opportunity to deepen and appreciate the richness of love. Because, again, going back to that example, just because it was in the context of this conversation of you paddling with your dad on that boat, it's like, these various traumatic experiences that we go through in life, if we can recognize them as catalysts for transmutation, it allows us to experience those more positive, on the David Hawkins scale of consciousness, those other emotions in a way where we appreciate them so much more. It's like we understand the richness that is there in those things because we've gone through the depths of the darker aspects of life. It gives us that depth, that richness where we just appreciate it so much more, and we understand how sacred those things are. And that's kind of the way that I've come to look at all those things as it relates to various traumatic experiences in my own life. And I I can say that, would I wish those experiences upon other people? No. Am I personally grateful for them? Yes, I absolutely am. And at the same time, that gratitude doesn't mean that like I'm happy that I experienced them because they've been incredibly hard. And it's like being able to hold both of those though. You know what I mean? It's like, but I know that at the deepest level, damn, I am very grateful for that because I did recognize it for what it was at some point in my life. I stopped perpetuating that which was done to me onto other people and recognized it, made amends there, forgave myself there, forgave others there. And it's allowed me to be the man who, when I think of my daughter, I cry. When I think of my dad, despite all that I've experienced with him, more and more lately, I cry because I'm like, wow, this is incredibly beautiful that I get to experience all this. And I just feel that I appreciate life in the little things in life so much more than I'd imagine I would have had I not gone through those darker things that I experienced.
Absolutely. I mean, these valleys give us depth, you know? I mean, I think one of my most positive qualities as a person is my capacity for compassion and empathy. I mean, I see people in their pain, and I really deeply feel for people, and I'm motivated to, within whatever healthy boundaries need to be there, to help alleviate suffering in the world, whether collectively or individually. I know that that's motivated by my experience of suffering myself, you know? It's like, you can't, like, I can talk to someone who's an addict. I mean, I can get through to them in ways that no one ever could that hasn't had that experience. That's what happened for me, you know? That's why, I mean, it's so interesting in the realm of addiction, you know, talk about like another really painful, destructive human adaptation. Historically speaking, even though spirituality is the antidote for addiction, religion has never worked for addicts. I mean, at scale, you know, every once in a while, some kind of, you know, a single experiment or something like I don't know, some moment of grace or some kind of awakening, right? But not something at scale like the 12-step movement, for example. And the reason, and same goes for therapy or authority. No one can stop an addict from using unless they have a desire to stop. And even then, there's no path, there's no way forward for them from anyone else other than people who have been where they are, right? And you could kind of expand that out to any human challenge. If you've gone through a lot of them, not only do you have some insights in terms of how to overcome them, but you're compelled to help others overcome them because you know how shitty it feels to be stuck in them.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, I'm pretty good at not imposing my will on people. I don't try to help people that don't want to be helped. But if they do and they're sincere and it's a healthy, you know, exchange or healthy dynamic, I can't not help people. I mean, like, I would not be able to stop myself from helping them unless it was a situation, of course, in which I was going to do more harm by helping them, right. Some codependent shit or savior complex or something. But you used the word victim before. And this has been a really important part of my forgiveness process in so many different situations. Victimhood as an identity is so antithetical to life because it siphons personal power to such a degree. It renders you completely inert and impotent and outsources all power to the external. The antidote to victimhood is responsibility. And finding one's responsibility in a case of true victimhood is very challenging because there's a slippery slope of victim shaming oneself and blaming oneself, right? But responsibility and blame are two different things. So if I look at, and I've looked at this deeply, when I was around 5 and I was abused, you know, how can I find I had no responsibility in that. And it was as pure of a perpetrator victim dynamic as you could imagine. But if I'm really, really honest, and again, this is not, self-shaming or anything like that, but if I'm really honest, and I was groomed very, very intentionally. So again, like still a lot of innocence in the victimhood there. But I was very dishonest and withholding about what was happening.
Mm.
And, again, not blaming. I didn't have the psychological maturity to know how to take that. And I don't know that there was like a safe place to take that or any, there was no context to do anything other than withhold and lie. But, the fact is just, if you just look at basic facts, I began lying and hiding when that was happening. So there's a little bit of responsibility there, but more than anything, the responsibility reclamation that moves me further and further out of victimhood is how I responded to that situation. So not the experience in and of itself, it's what I did with it for the years afterward, right? That experience, in its essence, if you take away the meaning from it, is one human being seeking some sort of intimacy and connection with another human being, albeit extremely inappropriately and harmfully. It's an experimentation of intimacy and sexuality, right? Which is one of the most confusing things about it, because when you're 5, the shame comes later when you realize like, oh, this wasn't normal,
right.
And you kind of know it's not normal what's happening, but in its purest sense, it's like two human beings connecting on one level. But the meaning that I created out of it later and the secrecy that led to the shame that I internalized over the years following that, and the choices I made around anesthetizing myself against those feelings, I did all of that, right?
Yeah.
The ways in which later in life those experiences manifested in my hurting other people. I didn't do it in the same way, thankfully. I'd have a whole other set of problems to reconcile, but I mean, I was extremely selfish and used other people for my own selfish interests and pleasures, and had total disregard for other people's humanity at times when I was younger. And, so I have the opportunity to take responsibility for all of that, and also taking responsibility for putting some work into, as we've been doing here today, just looking at these type of experiences from as many different angles as possible, and really taking the time and consideration to unpack them and work with them as an opportunity for growth and understanding. It's my responsibility to recontextualize that experience. And the more I'm able to do that, the less I feel myself as like the hopeless little boy who was solely a victim. Yeah. I was a victim, but in the repercussions of that experience, I also made decisions of my own volition that hurt me and other people. And those are the parts that I can take responsibility for. There's certain aspects of like something like that when you're really young, you have no responsibility the outside of karma, right? And that's all. We don't even know what happened there, right? How many children did I murder in a past life or molest? I mean, you could go, and I have gone there, so that's also a slippery slope for victim shaming, because then it's like, oh, I had it coming. I had the karma because I did that to someone in a past life or something, right? Which may or may not be true. But the way I understand karma, it's because the construct of time is manufactured, that what I perceive to be this lifetime from 1970 to 2025 is happening in concurrence with every other lifetime simultaneously. So it's not that in a past life I did something for which I have a karmic retribution due when I was 5 in 1975. It's that it's all happening at once in consciousness.
Yeah.
And so karma is immediate and instantaneous. So that invites a lot of self-responsibility. And that pretty much nukes victimhood, because if it's all happening at once, and what was happening to me in 1975 is happening right now in consciousness, if I allow it to be, it's just one moment. It's just a matter of like where my perspective is on that moment. My perspective when I was 5 was it's 1975 and this thing's happening, but it's still one eternal moment that I'm sitting here right here with you. So it's my responsibility that if I allow that moment to keep happening, if I'm living in that moment from 1975 and 2025, is that the perpetrator doing that, or is that me doing it?
Right.
So responsibility even goes into the realm of karma. And even with that, it's not, oh, I had it coming. It's just, it's coming.
Yeah.
Period. It's not about me. It's about the natural order of the universe, the natural order of consequence, like consequence with sequence. It's just the sequence.
Wow.
If I kick the wall with no shoe on right now and break my toe, it's not that hitting the wall caused my toe to break. It's that when you apply force to something that can't take that force against something else that has more mass, the consequence, the next thing that happens is that that bone breaks. But it didn't cause it to break. It's just the natural order of things. It's the sequence of events that naturally takes place. So if I zoom way out into the space that doesn't really exist as we believe it to. I think outer space. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, what do you say?
The other space. If I go on
other space.
If I go on the other side of the ice wall and look back at this realm, then it all starts to kind of make sense.
Yeah.
And then the victim perpetrator sort of roles and the karmic implications of all that, they sort of lose their potency and relevance, and then it all becomes down to 0 point right now. Who am I right now?
Yeah.
What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I doing? And am I doing the opposite of what I believe hurt me? Whatever the opposite is of what happened to me, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Which is, what is that? Love.
Yeah.
That's to do good whenever you possibly can, to have loving thoughts instead of hateful thoughts or fearful thoughts. And all of that is inherent to responsibility. And this is something I'm always working with. My biggest, I would say, boogeyman is the New World Order. This parasitic energy force that has co-opted a certain very small percentage of human beings on the planet that have somehow figured out how to dupe the rest of us into them controlling every aspect of our lives and extracting our life force in the various ways and ultimately exterminating us.
Yeah.
If I fear anything, it's those boogeymen. So I could feel like a victim to those energies, to those parasites, or I can take responsibility.
Yeah.
For, as I was saying earlier, how I've chosen to interact with them and the relationship that I've allowed to be established with them, with that system in and of itself, the hierarchical kind of like, where I put myself on the ladder, where I allow myself to be, where I feel like they're the boss and I'm their employee, when actually the system is set up that God is the boss, I'm the manager, and they are my employees.
Right.
You know what I mean?
What a flip.
Yeah. So there's a lot of meaning inversions that have been bestowed upon us in terms of, just culture, society, geopolitically, monetarily. Everything that we've been taught is essentially upside down and backwards, including how we're taught to contextualize the experiences in our lives, like the ones we've just been unpacking now. So it's like, wow, it's not that I need to change the experiences I've had or that I'm having or that I fear or hope that I will have. It's that I have an opportunity to take responsibility for how I change my perspective and how I contextualize the entirety of life experience and this reality in which I'm participating.
Mm.
You know, it's like, whoa, you actually really create your own life. It's not like some Tony Robbins, like, think positive and you have a positive life. It's like, no, really, the big R reality is this eternal now and everything that arises within it that we call life is completely produced by the energy with which I imbue it.
Yes.
Which brings me to another element of forgiveness. And I know you have questions to ask, but
This is great.
I'm impassioned. This one I got to tread lightly for a number of reasons. In the maybe a year or so into the fake virus, the pandemic, you know, my dad hated bureaucracy, the government. He didn't trust any of the institutions. He'd been so close to it his whole life, especially in business and things like that. And, you know, had been so failed by the pharmaceutical industry. And thus he went into all this alternative modalities of healing, et cetera. That when they started to roll out and enforce the mRNA gene therapy, I never even thought to talk to my dad about it because I just like, it was a given that he would never do that. Like, I don't have to talk to my, hey, Alec, don't go to Rite Aid and get the thing. Like, yeah. I would have to say that to you.
Right.
Duh.
Right.
We all know what they're up to. Right. So I never mentioned it to him. And then one day, you know, I called him and, how you doing? Oh man, I'm really sick. You know, I went and got the shot. And I was like, what? And I didn't want to shame him or get him worried. So okay, that's interesting. I didn't really say much about it, but I was devastated because I don't know, at least I thought I understood the implications of that. And at the time, my perception, again, going back to perception, creating all of reality, I don't know, being judgmental is maybe a bit too harsh, but I was disappointed in his lack of character or discernment. I was surprised and disappointed, like, dude, you went again. I know he knows better. Right. So I think, right? And like, at what point did you go, I know what my gut's telling me, but I'm just going to do it. You know, so I kind of felt like, I was terrified for the outcome because I was starting to see some of the fallout from that. And I just sensed that it was never about keeping people healthy. It was about eliminating a large swath of the human population. So I'm like, oh man, so I'm afraid. And, you know, I'm hoping he got a placebo, but I don't think he did because he got immediately sick. Yeah. But I don't want to rock the boat. It's none of my business actually either. He never asked me, what do you think? So I never told him. What good is he going to do? He already did it, you know?
If anything, you want to quell, diffuse fear at this point.
Yeah, but I was, you know, I did have the sense like, oh man, you know, you've been doing really good in this incarnation, Dad, and you just failed a massive test, dude. This was a massive test of deception, of your inner knowing, your discernment. You went to sleep, you blew it, and there's probably going to be a price to pay, but that's your life. That was kind of my attitude. And man, I just better love him up while he's here because he just did something very dangerous. A few months later, he starts like passing out.
Oh man.
And falling down.
Oh man. My
dad ain't the guy that falls down. That story I told you about him rowing the boat. Yeah. Dude, that would have been, he was like in his late 70s at that time. I would have been, I don't know, in my late 40s, whatever. He goes, hey, you want to take the what do you call them, rows or whatever? Yeah. You want to take paddles. The rows, give it paddles? Oh yeah, I'll do it. I take his spot. I go about 10 feet. I'm smoked. I'm done. It's like, oh my God, this sucks. My back hurts. My arms are giving out. Like, I'm done. Yeah. I couldn't have even made it back to the shore where we came from. This is a small lake. I was toast. I can't do this. He gets back on like
Yeah.
nothing. He was a strong guy, both in will and tenacity, but also just physically durable guy.
Mm-hmm.
Very strong from good stock, you know? And he starts falling down. I'm like, yeah, this guy doesn't fall down. And then he fell down once, you know, fishing in the river and hit his head, passed out, you know. This shit starts happening. I'm like, uh-oh. None of my business. I don't know what's going on. I have my ideas, but I don't know. And then he has an aneurysm and gets, you know, medvaced in a helicopter, almost dies.
How recent is this?
This is a couple years ago.
Okay.
This is like within a few months of him
Got it.
Doing that medical experiment. And, you know, I was ready to fly out, and then, you know, they got the blood out of his brain and he recovered, and I had my suspicions as to what caused that. But again, they're just suspicions. I don't know. And then so, you know, we know that heart issues, heart attacks, strokes, et cetera, heart disease, myocarditis, all this kind of stuff, is now becoming widely known as a side effect of that medication. And so, you know, when I found out he had a heart attack, I'm like, duh. But a beautiful thing happened, you know, in the realm of forgiveness. When I was in his room thinking about that, just like, man, how many more years could I have had with him if he hadn't have done that? And just going through all that, just like, oh, I wish I would have warned him more sternly, or had the wherewithal to be like, hey, do what you want to do, but here's what I'm finding, you know,
Right.
in my world on that, to discourage him from doing that. I saw that in the great scheme of things, he went out at a really great time. He's 81, still very active. He worked out with a trainer twice a week, played tennis 2 or 3 times a week, could still go outdoors. He'd always said he never wanted to be in an old folks home. He never wanted a walker. He never wanted to get old and have dementia, diabetes, you know, cancer. He was not about that. He only wanted to be alive as long as he was able to be himself and do his thing and be outdoors and be active, you know? And so I thought, well, you know, say he hadn't done that, which is, of course, what I would have chosen, and I would have had more years to spend with him. He might have very well ended up living until he was 99 like his mom. And what would his quality of life have been from 90 to 99 or 82 to 92 or whatever it would have been, right? It's like, instead of feeling like I'm victimized by this mafia that for whatever reason just wants to kill a lot of people, it's very obvious that that's their intention. And so you could say I've been victimized as losing someone I deeply love prematurely as a result of their nefarious actions. So I think, again, I can't prove this. I really don't know.
But you don't know for sure, but
you know, my intuition and kind of inner knowing points to this, but I have the humility to admit I have no idea. But as I've started to kind of go through the different phases of this, there's been times where I've been pretty pissed.
Yeah.
And, you know, people said, oh, how did your dad die? And it occurred to me, I believe he was murdered. Whoa, that changes the game quite a bit, right? Why does that change the game? Because it changes my perception. Yeah. It changes my opinion. It changes my attitude. It changes my belief around something that's very meaningful and catastrophic in many ways. But if God is consciousness and God is all things in the totality of our existence, and God expresses itself as these, you know, demonic pharmaceutical warlords that are just hell-bent on annihilating the human population, if that's also God, then where is the grace and where is the humanity in the decision that he made? And I don't know, but I like to think that having a massive heart attack, passing out, and having zero suffering and peacefully checking out, it's about as close as you can get to like peacefully dying in your sleep, which is how we all want to go. He could have been driving a car at the time. I mean, you know, like, there's an infinite number of scenarios you could dream up that would have been more traumatic and more painful for not only him, but for everyone that loved him.
Right.
All things considered in the big picture, regardless of what was, in reality, the cause of death, it's kind of smooth. The only part that's difficult for me to reconcile in that, which is the part I'm starting to hit up against now, is, what about me?
Mm-hmm.
What did I lose? Something was taken from me, which was more time in the material form of my dad.
Yeah.
And now I, have to wait to know him in other places, in other realms when I leave. Or, I have to do all this extra work to try to contact him on the other side now, and I don't know that I'm not good at that. So that's been a whole other, like, here, Luke, here's another kind of forgiveness exercise for you. Can you forgive if they did what you think they did? Can you forgive them? It's like, wow, that's a lot. That's a big one. And then another beautiful realization, I don't know that that's beautiful, but a beautiful realization that came out when I was in his room was, thinking about all of that and thinking back to how I was seeing that he kind of sold out and that he failed a test. I was shown another possibility, and that was that he actually passed a test by doing that, in that he decided to do that out of love for others that might have been worried or concerned about him.
Mm-hmm.
And that maybe his bypassing of his inner knowing, which I believe he had, was in some ways sacrificial.
Yeah.
Or even carrying a higher wisdom that I'm getting up in years, and how long do I really want to be around? And if I can help to assuage the concerns of some people, maybe this is just the easiest, not the easiest, but maybe this is the path, the most compassionate path.
Yeah.
Which was really beautiful, and again, this is all speculation. These are just things I just kind of weigh these things out, and I hold my beliefs and opinions very loosely. And
but it makes sense though too, especially like you knowing your dad, knowing how he's been on this health journey just as you have, and him making this decision that even caught you off guard. It's like, okay, there's got to be more to this than I'm thinking of in this present moment when I'm upset, and when I sort of look at it from different angles, it could make sense that the loved ones around him or the people around him in his community that were incredibly afraid, despite him not being, him seeing the higher picture. Okay, I'm doing this out of love for them, despite me knowing that it's wrong. I'm sacrificing myself for others. And as much as it is both like these evil mother, like these pharmaceutical companies, disgusting, evil, I share that same opinion as you. And this decision made by this individual that I love so much, I can see where they made that decision out of love for other people, going against their own gut. And it's like being able to hold both of those at the same time.
Yeah.
Man.
I have a sense that, because that insight came to me rather suddenly in his room, just a change of perspective, just going, let me walk across the room and look at the idea that I'm holding in a different way. I think that was him.
Yeah.
Saying like, actually, kid, there's more to the story. Yeah. There's more to the story,
Especially because it came in so instantly like that.
And that was very comforting too, because I wanted him to go out winning.
Yeah.
And I felt like he failed a big test, and like that cost him some years here. Mm-hmm. I don't know, it doesn't feel as good. Mm-hmm. I mean, not like he was, intentionally harming himself or something, but just, the intentionality behind it, whether he was even aware of it or not. Mm-hmm. That he was willing to take a risk out of being motivated by love, more so than fear, because he wasn't afraid of that fake ass thing at all.
Yeah.
I mean, he might have believed it was real a little,
but nonetheless, he took the same position that most took, that like their government's inflating this.
Yeah. He was awake enough to know that. So how cool is that, as an opportunity to just go, wow.
What if nature's intelligence could directly influence your physiology, helping to regulate your nervous system, sharpen your intuition, and shift your emotional state in a measurable way. For over 25 years, Lotus Way has been pioneering the use of flower essences, liquid infusions that capture the bioenergetic imprint of plants. Unlike essential oils, these remedies work on a vibrational level, interacting with your body's meridians and electrical system to promote clarity, resilience, and balance. Katie Hess, who I featured on episode 74 of the Way Forward podcast, has spent decades studying the effects of over 300 rare and powerful flowers, hand collecting them from across the world. The result? A line of elixirs, mists, and anointing oils, and even some chocolate, designed to shift your state of mind and body, not through placebo, but through the subtle yet profound ways plant frequencies interact with human biology. I think flower essences are severely overlooked in the wellness space because it really is an incredible way to package up the wisdom and the innate intelligence of nature and deliver it to your body. And it brings your body back into coherence because it's tuning you on an energetic level like an instrument. So if you want to find which flower essences are right for you, you can take the flower quiz so you can see which ones match your current energetic state. As a listener of The Way Forward, you get an exclusive discount. Just use code ALEC10 for 10% off your first order. Or if you're the Way Forward member, get 20% off plus ongoing savings, and just reach out to us if you're a member and we'll get you your membership discount. Just go to lotusway.com/Alec or just head to the show notes so you can experience one of nature's most powerful energetic remedies today.
I really enjoy being wrong. I love when I'm very certain about something and I allow for a little window in the corner of the room to remain cracked and a bit of wind starts coming in and it piques my curiosity and I start moving more into that fresh air, right? And then I open the window a bit more and I look outside and I go, oh my God, I was looking at this from such a limited point of view. So I like to hold my beliefs and thoughts and everything loosely. I find it's a really healthy way to live and ultimately takes away a lot of the suffering. Life includes suffering, but I find it makes being able to change my mind about things ultimately allows me to suffer less because the periods of suffering are much more brief in duration, and the depths to which I'm taken in that suffering are a much less so.
Yeah.
It's like if I get really down about something, it's like, I'm not down, like where I used to be, just completely suicidal and homicidal and just absolutely insane. I never go there. And when I do get even anywhere remotely close to that, it's very short-lived because it usually involves looking at things differently and being willing to surrender ideas to which I'm attached.
Well, it's because you know acutely that your true identity is not in the belief systems, the objects and labels, but in that which creates the belief systems, objects, and labels. So when you can rest on your true identity being that which never changes, but creates the illusion of change, the change comes more easily to you.
Yeah.
You can accept the change more easily because you know where your true identity is.
Yeah. I can't believe your dad and I are the same age. It's just funny. Maybe he had you young or something, but I forget. What are you like in your early 30s or something?
32.
So crazy, dude. Like the understanding you have of life and the world. It's really beautiful. You're so smart. I
surround myself with people like you, man.
You're so tapped in. Just thinking where I was at 32. Oh my God, bro. I was literally an infant, a couple years sober, just lost, man. No clue about anything, but pretty sure I knew everything, So I'm so I want to say envious, but more excited for you that you're already, grasping life and the things you're you're working through at such an early age. I mean, just imagine, like, you keep integrating this level of understanding and wisdom. I mean, you have so much freaking living to do ahead of you. It's going to be such an exciting, fruitful life, having gotten to this point already, 3 decades in, man. You've got like a lot of years to live out what you've learned. It's beautiful.
Thank you, bro.
I mean, I feel like I'm just kind of figuring it out. And, you know, one of the things about your parents dying is, like, with my dad, I mean, I'm the oldest brother. When I was in his room, it occurred to me, I've known him longer than anyone in this room. I've known this dude 54 years. And the next thought is, chronologically, I'm up next.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's true. I'm living pretty well. But,
Yeah, you're a pretty healthy guy.
But still, you know, it's like,
In terms of
man,
age, yeah.
thank God I'm at least figuring out, you know, from, I don't know, I started to get a clue maybe in my 40s-ish. So now go, wow, 55, you know, 54, 64, 74, 84. In 30 years, I'm be 84 if I live. That's crazy. 30 years goes by like that.
Mm.
I mean, the past 30 years of my life is like a blink of the eye, you know? So I mean, things happen the way they have, but I only wish I had the wisdom that you have when I was 32. I probably have a much different life and could have avoided a lot of bad decisions.
Yeah, you say that, but like, look at the depth of the person that you are, you know, like, it's beautiful. And I appreciate that. I do.
Yeah.
I appreciate you saying that. And I think it's because I overwhelmingly perpetually stay in the position of, I don't know shit, which ironically leads me to the depth of positions that other people aren't willing to explore, that I'm like, hey, I think I might have found the thing that other people aren't willing to consider, and then sharing that, but then turning out that there's another piece of it that I'm wrong on. But the point is perpetually staying in that position of I don't know, and I'm wanting to explore and figure out myself, figure out my relationships, figure out this realm with childlike curiosity, and being able to surround myself with people like you. I'm so grateful, man. It's incredible. Like, I get to hang out with people like you, and yes, you're my dad's age, but the overwhelming majority of my friends are my dad's age, so it's all good, man.
Yeah, it's funny.
There's
a lot to be said for surrounding yourself with people that are older.
Mm-hmm.
I've always done that.
Yeah.
You know, even when they were like negative influences on my life. I don't know. I've always wanted to be around people that act as expanders for me, more so than me being, you know, the one that's pulling the weight and being the smartest guy in the room, so to say, with the exception of being of service. I mean, there was a lot of years in recovery where I had more going on than my circle of friends in terms of understanding and living life well. But there was an intentionality behind that. There was a purpose and a structure to those relationships that facilitated that. But even that at a certain point became a limitation for me. And it's like, well, I don't want to be the guy that like has the answers. I want to be around people that have more answers than I do, you know?
Yeah.
It's always been kind of wired that way too.
But on that note, with respect to service, I mean, there's so many other things I wanted to get into. We'll have to do a part 2 for sure. Cause like, I want to talk about your perspective on plant medicine and the nuance between using it as a tool for like inner knowing and self-knowledge and a different lens of awareness, you could say. And then there's some people who use it as a form of escape, and there's such a balance between the two. But we'll save that for another time.
Oh, that's so tempting.
I know it's
there's so
tough.
much to say in that. Let me say one thing.
Yeah,
to that.
one thing. Okay.
No, I'll make it brief because I know we've been going for ages here. When I was a kid, literally, I used to do a ton of mushrooms and acid, you know, and I categorized those drugs just like all the other drugs. I did heroin, crack, cocaine, crystal meth, alcohol, weed, etc. I was like, there's just all drugs. And I had some really terrible experiences with psychedelics because I didn't know then that the effect that I was trying to produce was the exact opposite that what those particular molecules in that category, you know, in psychedelics provide. Like they're actually going to show you the things that you're trying to avoid when you do heroin. So inevitably, when I would use psychedelics, I would always have to get drunk and like do other drugs because I would start to see things about myself and my life that were very painful. And I didn't have the tools to navigate through them. And the set and setting that I was using was just complete chaos and reckless abandon. There was like no framework whatsoever to do any kind of work. So when I got sober, I neatly categorized all drugs together like they'd always been. And it wasn't until, a couple decades into my sobriety that I started just hearing rumors about this ayahuasca and mushrooms and tools for growth. And I was like, wait, what? So I thought at first they were all off limits to me because I identify as someone who is sober and in recovery, and you don't use mind-altering chemicals, except, we all kind of get away with caffeine and nicotine, right?
So true.
Mind-altering, but not to the degree that those kind of other drugs are. So long story short, when I started venturing into those realms, so, there's a whole story of how I have reconciled my sobriety and my relationship to that, which is a whole other podcast. But I had such transformative, profound, life-changing experiences and such a refinement of my character, my morals, a reorientation of my values, my behavior, the way I think, the way I feel. I mean, it's so deeply transformative to me that for a couple years, I naively thought that anyone who works with psychedelics and plant medicines, even, in an intentional way in those circles, which are now, these circles are widening and more people are, of course, experimenting in those realms, but, in a ceremonial context, etc. I just assumed naively that everyone who works with psychedelics also has that same moral refinement that I experienced. That I was certainly more enlightened after working with plant medicines for a few years than I was before I started. And so I thought, well, that's how it is for everyone. It turns out that's not the case. Mm-hmm. I've met many people that have, smoked bufo 40 times and been on, 200 ayahuasca journeys, and they are still either struggling terribly in their life with any number of different issues, or are totally non-integrous, dishonorable, untrustworthy people. And I cannot understand that. I'm so naive in this way. I literally do not understand how you could sit with medicine a number of times and still knowingly hurt people, deceive people, take advantage of people, use people. I literally do not understand how you could continue to behave that way. And this isn't because I used to be that way. So, okay. Right. So I'm not, This isn't a holier than thou thing. I'm talking about how can you sit with psychedelics and emerge as the same person that you were before you went in? That I am totally clueless. I'm oblivious to how that is possible. But I know that it is because I've interacted with people who, I wouldn't trust more than I could throw them, and they've done a lot of work with psychedelics. It's super weird.
Do you think it's because you had the foundational context on the 12-step programs, that doing the self-work beforehand, and you didn't come into the psychedelic space with, this is going to save me, but here's another tool that I'm hearing might be a curious thing to give me a little bit more self-knowledge, a breakthrough, looking at things from a different lens? Because the way that I perceive it from zooming out, and I've done mushroom ceremonies, I've never sat with ayahuasca, I've not done bufo yet. There was that one time where I was about to, and then it ended up not working out.
I'm texting you every day. Did you do it yet?
Did you do it yet? Which is so great.
Dude, there's nothing in the world I like talking to someone about than their bufo experience.
Dude, I really still want to.
So anyway, selfishly, I want everyone to do it just so we can talk about it.
I know, it's so funny.
It's kind of like if, I don't know, I'm guessing if you had an out-of-body or near-death experience, you can tell someone about it, but no one's really going to understand unless they've had it too.
Totally.
Unlike other psychedelics, bufo is 5-MeO-DMT is kind of like that. It's you can't explain it. It doesn't compare to any other plant medicines or psychedelics. It's not even a psychedelic to me. It's a supernatural experience.
That's what I've heard.
I mean, it's so beyond this realm that, I mean, it's just, I would do it every day if it wasn't so terrifying and I didn't feel like my entire grasp on this reality would completely disintegrate and I'd end up probably being a non-functional person,
Right.
Which I don't know that would be bad, but there is a part of the construct of my psyche that doesn't want to let go of kind of this life,
I've heard it gives you deeper context into what this life is, though, when you come back into this life and integrate. And that's the point that I wanted to make, is like the people who approach it from a position where it's like, oh, I need something, I'm going to go use this tool as a form of doing the work, rather than I'm using this to give me a different lens and showing me the work that needs to be done.
Yeah. I think everyone has their own.
Is that accurate? Or
well,
would you say
everyone has their own unique path. I mean, in contrast to what I said, that, it's shocking to me that people can have those experiences and emerge still like unscrupulous people. There are also as many people I've met that didn't really have a lot of framework like I had when I went into the space, and have been totally transformed.
Wow.
And healed too,
so it's different for everyone.
So it does happen for that. It's hard not to superimpose my experience onto other people. And that's why there's like a disconnect. Like, wait, what? I meet someone and they're totally fucked up still. And they're like, oh, I've done ayahuasca 200 times. I'm just like, what were you doing in there? Like, why are you still this way? Right.
Right.
And, I think there's karmic implications, and, some of us are wired. There's a passage in the AA book that says something to the effect of, those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not be completely honest with themselves. They seem to be constitutionally incapable of doing so. There are some people that they don't have the onboard operating system to allow for complete, transparent self-reflection and self-honesty. And I think they're just, in some lifetimes, you just didn't get that. And so you could sit with medicine 1,000 times and you're never going to face yourself. You might have peak experiences. You might see the entities. You might commune with God, have deep prayers, heal some of your trauma. But you're not really going to, even in those situations, be able to see under the hood in a way that someone who just has that ability, But I do have one answer as to why this happens and why it's happened for me this way. Is, to your point, for 22 years, all I did was integrate the principles of the 12 steps and many other spiritual teachings into my life. Now, I still had issues, especially in relationships. I mean, there were things I could not get past, certain patterns, which I came to find out all had to do with just lingering trauma that I just never really, really went into and addressed. So it was coming back up and being recreated so that I could address it. But when I started going into medicine, I mean, I'm in the ceremony, and what I'm like working on and contemplating are the spiritual principles that I've been integrating into my character for the entire couple decades, right? So I'm going in there, like, I remember one of the first ayahuasca ceremonies, I had one teacher in the steps that was the first guy to really show me that the mind is not who you are. And so he was always training me to watch the mind, right? Oh, he'd say, you got to see your mind, Luke. And I'm like, what are you talking about? All I am is mind. There's no me to see it because I was so consumed by it, you know? And I was in that ceremony, and that's what I was working with. I was like, you got to see your mind. Oh, and then I'm in there with the robot elves and everything, and they come in and start doing surgery on my brain, and I'm like, oh, you got to see your mind, like layers and layers of just that teaching, and it goes on and on and on. But so I'm not just in there, oh, wow, pretty colors, and wow, this is trippy. I mean, I'm in there like, okay, what are we going to work on when we're in here, right? It's like, ooh, I have a really ripe opportunity to go deeper than I can in my normal waking state. What's under the surface there? Whether under the surface happens to be, some memories or some trauma that I need to fully feel and address that's terrifying and painful, or just depths of prayer that I've never been able to achieve in my normal waking state. Just knowing that there is a God and that God is love, and like, the kind of prayers where you're not like sitting there wondering if you're being heard or if it's going to have an impact, but
an immersive experience.
Yeah. It's a call and response,
the response
situation,
is like, whoa,
right?
Okay,
yeah.
Right.
And so,
right.
I mean, I think that's why I've been fortunate in that regard was due to that framework, and just so many different things I've explored. The David Hawkins work, the levels of consciousness, Byron Katie's work, asking yourself, is that true?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
Dispenza, going to India, doing Kundalini yoga for 8 years, constantly. So many of the different kind of constructs of understanding that I had explored and put into application in my life, but then experiencing them in real time and like bringing them to life in those experiences, I think is what's helped me emerge a different person. But also there's a price to pay for access to those realms. And I think honestly, my nervous system has taken a bit of a hit.
Really?
Yeah. From the medicine work, which is why I'm very kind of cautious about it.
Yeah.
Cautious, prudent.
Yeah.
I love the principle of prudence is beautiful. If you look it up, the definition is rational concern without worry or fear. Prudence. Prudence is a beautiful principle.
Wow.
It's a principle of the 12 steps, prudence.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's not from the 12 steps. It's just one that they, integrated into their model. Last thing I'll say on is this, and I promise it'd be short.
No,
I knew it wouldn't be if we got into this topic.
I went there.
But back to Bufo, I had been such an avid student of David Hawkins, and like his model of consciousness to me has always made more sense than anything. It's the most pragmatic. It's the most aligned with the 12 steps, which is, where he came from as part of his story. It's like a beautiful blend of psychology and non-dual spirituality. And so that's been kind of my real main guiding light in my growth. And so going into Bufo, for example, and understanding conceptually what duality and non-duality is in terms of like what it means, but not really having been there.
Yeah.
Going into Bufo and experiencing the totality of everything all at once for 3 to 5 minutes and being completely outside of duality, or 99.999%, because for moments you are actually there because there's no you to even witness the experience. The experiencer and the experience merge into one, and you're deaf, blind, you're not there.
Wow.
Yeah, like a lot of practitioners will hit a drum or like ring a bell after you take the hit. And then when you come out of it, the whole thing lasts 20, 30 minutes, right? And they come out and they go, did you hear the drum? You're like, drum? What are you talking about? Like, I didn't hear a drum. They go, okay, good. You had enough, right? It means default mode network, offline. You're gone. Yeah. The brain is not necessary anymore in this experience. You're having, on the Hawkins scale, I had someone calibrate one of my Bufo journeys. I got up to like 800, 850, 870 for like 1 minute,
Wild.
Yeah. I mean, you have to meditate for 47 lifetimes to even get close to that as one peak experience, but as like in a Bufo, for example, going into non-duality, totality, you're not there to know you were there, but as it starts to subside and then you start to re-emerge as the observer, you kind of know where you just were because you're not all there. You're kind of like being born back into duality. And in that, I know what non-duality is. Mm-hmm. And I know I think I know, I'm always open to knowing more, but I was able to see the last time I did it, I was able to see the divinity in good and evil.
Wow.
And I remember thinking about George Soros, Klaus Schwab, Bill Clinton, Obama, just all these people that I just despise, Kissinger, just all of them, all these ghouls just started coming to my awareness. And I was like laughing, just going, oh man, they're so beautiful. They're playing their roles with such perfection. I mean, down to the way they look with Bill Gates with his tits and just they're so disgusting.
Klaus Schwab with the evil, Dr. Evil.
Yeah,
look.
yeah. I mean, it's like, you can't make it up because God made it up better than you ever could. Right. And then so it's like, I don't know that I could arrive at the direct experience of that any other way. I mean, I guess you could work at it for lifetimes and lifetimes and get there. People do. But then the thing is, you see that and then you get in your car and someone cuts you off and you still want to kill that motherfucker. Right? So then, I'm not enlightened. I'm still human. I come back and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm still me. I still have my insecurities, my neuroses, my little attachments and addictions and shit, right? But you at least have a North Star. You can't stay there because the price to pay is too high. Your nervous system would evaporate and you would leave your body.
There's a point for that, right? Because it's not meant for embodiment, at least not in the long term.
Yeah,
there's a reason where
you can't stay there.
Right.
But you at least get to peek through the door and go, okay, there's a big ass room in there that I read about, but now I poked my head through the door and you go, okay, I gotta step back into this fake room, but the reality room is on the other side of that door. And someday I'm going there and it's totally safe there and it's beautiful there. The only terrifying part is the threshold to that door. And that's the part that I watched my dad walk through. And that's how I know he's okay, because I know where he is. Because I got to see what it looks like for a second. Or at least something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I sat in the room and did medicine and meditated with him, because I wanted to be as close to that. As close as I could to that place where he was and where he was going. But I still have work to do here, so to me, psychedelics are a way to do that work while you're still here, but they also don't come without risk and without some degree of sacrifice. Yeah. Because we're not, there's a reason why you have to take something. Most of us have to take something to get there. We're not designed to be there all the time in this. Otherwise we wouldn't be here.
Right.
We would be in the etheric realms, the angelic realms. We'd be a guardian angel floating out. I don't know where we go, but if we're here, it's like the name of the game is working your way up from, on the Hawkins scale, the level of bacteria at like consciousness level 1 to work yourself up into Christhood or Buddhahood at 1,000, where you can't actually be held in a body anymore because there's too much energy and the nervous system can't handle that. Right. So that's why you can't just like skip to the front of the line and live at 750 of enlightenment or whatever by using psychedelics. But you can at least see what it looks like and have a benchmark, have a goal. And that's the way I look at it, I
mean, it gives you the context and, like you said, the North Star, that like this is the true reality that I'm a part of, that I'm inextricably linked to, that I'm fundamentally an aspect of. And when you experience death, as I'm hearing in this conversation with you, it's both allowing yourself to fully grieve, missing the part of that physical embodiment, and also knowing that he's not even gone. He's here right now in another form, in this ultimate reality, capital R reality, as you said, and resting and sort of taking the weight off your shoulders and resting into that both at the same time.
Yeah. And to that end, it's been quite some time since I've worked with medicine, because I never seek it out. I've never sent a text out like, hey, I want to do psychedelics. What's happening? Literally, it's always just come to my doorstep. 9 out of 10 times, I don't feel a strong enough pull to do it, so I don't. And these days, it really doesn't enter my field very often. But when I came back from Florida, I thought, I'm not going to go seek it out because I just want to face this experience as it is. Okay. This is the last thing I'll say. But I feel like I'm open to it, even though I haven't really felt the call at all in quite a long time. I'm open to it if it would be something that would help me kind of work through this loss and just face it in a deeper way. And so I get back and I call my friend Aubrey, who lost his dad, I think it was a couple years ago now. And, I said that to him. I haven't really felt called to medicine, but I never do it unless it happens. Anyway, he goes, well, funny you should mention it because we're going to Peru in a couple weeks to sit with Wachuma up in the Andes at 12,000 feet at the Chavin Temple. And it's going to be a really powerful experience with some indigenous elders there. And I was like, instant, full body ticket. I'm buying a ticket. We got off the phone. So Tuesday, I'm going down to do that.
Incredible.
And we'll see what I learn.
And that's so cool when you're coming at it from that position too, where it's not that you're trying to seek this out. You're not desperate for the medicine, but when it comes to you and it's the right time, you know that it
seeks me out. And when it does, I listen.
Yeah. It's beautiful, man. There's so much I want to get into with your book. There's so many other things, but we'll have
because of my
two.
dad dying, my book deadline got postponed a couple months, thankfully. So it's not going to come out until the fall of 26 rather than the spring. So I feel like I have time to talk about that.
Good.
Later.
Okay. Well, we'll have you on again, man.
Thanks, bro.
Dude, I'm honored to have had this experience with you. Thank you so much, Luke.
Thank you.